Okay.
All right, welcome to the December State Board of Ed meeting. We're gonna go ahead and get started. Bring us in. Rajesh, I think you traveled the farthest since, or around since the last meeting, so do you want to lead the pledge real quick? Great. I pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Raj, you know how many miles you've logged since our last board meeting that you were at? You keep track of
How far is it around the world, right?
Yeah.
Twice.
Next month again, I'm on.
All right. I don't have a sign up sheet. Do we have public comment?
I just checked and I didn't see anybody signed up.
We just check one more time.
Yeah, was anyone here?
Yeah,
I
just
just
see if
asked,
anybody
but-
else signed up.
Was anyone here to sign up for public comment?
No.
Anybody know? Wow, okay. Great. Okay, Julie, you're up.
Good morning, Julie Shea, Administrative Rules Coordinator. The first agenda item this morning is the amended conditional approval response for EV 30601 to EV 30626, the minimum standards. I included in your packet a summary as well as the comments from the Legislative Oversight Committee and the amended conditional approval response. Chairman Klein, Attorney Brown, and I went to the jail car on November 19th, 21st. It was,
In that ball.
yes, it was one of those days. And they did approve our amended conditional approval response. I'm happy to answer any questions, or Chairman Klein may be able to since he was there as well. But we are looking to vote on that to send that over to OLS so they can review it and approve it and send it back for adoption later.
I think just for the record, one of the biggest misconceptions about the rules, the final rules as written, was addressed at length at that meeting, which we're continuing to see some incorrect information out in public about, which is class sizes. The class size caps we kept, so we did not change the class size in these new rules. That is just not true. The class size caps remain in place for going forward for the minimum standards. So I just wanted to say that for the record, because we still keep seeing that being spread around, that we eliminated class size caps, and that's not true. And Jill Carr, as our own attorney, interjected in the meeting to confirm that they were in there. So anything else? Anybody have? All right. Okay. So
I move that the State Board of Education approve. Approve the amended conditional approval response for ED 306.01 through 306.26.
Second.
all in favor?
Aye.
All right.
Thank you.
SAU Spotlight, Kimberly.
Morning, I'm Justin Krieger, Superintendent of Schools of the Timberlane Regional School District. Kim Rivers is here with me. She's the Early Childhood Learning Coordinator. We want to speak for maybe 3 to 5 minutes, and then we want to dedicate the bulk of our time to hear from some Timberlane families about their experiences in some special education programming here in our district. Angela, do you have that quick slide deck?
I do.
Thank you so
Hold on,
much.
Hold on, let me get this actually up and running so I can. Oops. Where's my things on top? There we go. It'll take a minute to do
No, it's fine.
that.
As
There
Angela
it goes.
pull that up. I have not been in front of the state board since June of 2012. My last time I was here, I brought an application for Next Charter High School that's still in operation. It just celebrated past a decade. It's gonna look to expand to 100 kids. So I'm really excited to be back for a second time, although in a different vein. I think it's a similar thing. I'm here to talk about a program in our public schools that is deeply connective for families, that personalizes pathways and that develops deep relationships with the constituents that we have. So what I'm here to speak about is Timberlane's partnership with the NECC institution, and that's the New England Center for Children, and that's an organization that works with students on the autism spectrum. And specifically in Timberlane, we have a partnership where we have 2 partner classrooms in our schools. One is at Kim School in Sandown, and the other is at an elementary school. We're looking to build that programming into our middle schools, into our high schools in the forthcoming years. A little bit about Timberlane, Angela, if you could go to the next deck, just give you some context. We're a fairly large school district here in New Hampshire. We're regional. We comprise 4 towns, Atkinson, Danville, Plastow, and Sandown. Each of those towns houses its own elementary school. We have a regional campus where we have our middle school, our high school. We also have a performing arts center and an early childhood learning center. We serve about 3,300 students. Like most districts across New Hampshire, we are at or above the average of special education population. We're at about 21% in our school district right now. And also, like other public school districts in New Hampshire, we are challenged by a lot of competing forces right now. One is that driving cost of increased costs for special education services, and that's countered and coupled with the really struggle for school districts to hire qualified and licensed personnel to deliver those services. And that's all in the backdrop, as all of you know, in terms of the requirements placed on school districts to provide those services. So this is a unique partnership that I think serves families and students really, really well. So what is an NEC partner classroom? It's a contractual relationship that we have with NECC. In return, NECC provides for us 1 specialized lead teacher with some part-time clinical supervision. School district provides the facility and also the one-to-one tutors for these students in a program that's about 6 or 7 students large. So it's highly specialized, but it's happening in the public school system. So as you think about that partnership, what you end up having is a very highly specialized program. Inside of that program, you've got further degree of specialization individually for those students, and it's happening inside the public school setting. So think about the opportunities for access. Think about the opportunities for everyone in that setting, not only the children and families in the programs, but the children and families that are also attending that school and how they can act in partnership that way. So that's why we are attempting to bring these programs to our school. They're cost effective for us, and they meet the needs of students and families inside of their resident communities. Who you're going to meet today is 3 families. We have 10 families enrolled in our school district right now. 3 of them are going to share their experiences and really hope engage you in questions and answers about what those experiences are like for their children in this program in our Timberlane schools. Before we get there, I did want to have Kim speak a little bit about more specifics about the program so you can wrap your head around that. So when the families speak, you've got a greater degree of context in terms of what they're experiencing in our schools.
Right.
Thanks,
Thank you,
Kim.
Justin.
Appreciate it.
All right, Angela. Next slide, please. All right, so the first question is, and I will apologize, I woke up this morning and of course my voice is already cracking, so just timing. So why an early learning childhood coordinator? So my position. As you all know, really the key to really a success for all children is that early intervention piece. So Timberlane, back in 2023, around February, decided to change a position that was just a principal position at the school that I'm at right now and incorporate it into an early childhood position. So I am able to oversee not only that building, but I also oversee the early childhood programs in the other 3 elementary schools that have pre-K programs. So 1, it's the early intervention piece, but 2, and this is really one of the reasons why I came back to early childhood from being in special education at middle school, is because I firmly believe that we need to get families off on the right track when it comes to the special education process. They are an integral part of the team. And I've heard too many stories of families just having to fight with school districts or not understanding the special education process. So really my commitment is to come back to where kids are starting. They're coming from early supports and services. Their parents have no idea what this big, bad public school system is like. And I'm really there to help them, guide them along that way. So that's why this early childhood coordinator position is just so important. And along those lines, I was able to talk with Justin and Kelly Brooks, she's the director of special education, about having this NECC partner classroom. that we had at Atkinson Academy for elementary school and seeing if we could bring one down to the early childhood classroom for our preschool, pre-K, and kindergarten students. We were able to do that. I'm really happy to say that we are the first and currently the only early childhood NECC partner classroom in the state. And it's going really well. And again, that goes back to providing interventions early. So it benefits the students because the student is getting what they need in the public school system. Justin took a lot of what I was going to say, so I won't repeat that piece. For families, their children are able to stay in their town with with peers. They don't have to put their child on a bus to go 45 minutes or an hour to get the degree of service and the level of service that they're getting here with us in Timberlane. We also provide, as part of that, if families want to, the lead teacher and one of the tutors can go to the family's houses within the contractual school day for up to 2 hours at a time and help them problem solve with the student any issues that they may be happening at home, maybe help them, I'm having a hard time kind of getting through the supermarket with my student. Can you, help me with any strategies? So that is really a huge benefit to the families that we wouldn't be able to do if we didn't have the program. And then Justin said this piece as well. What does it provide for Timberlane? I have had Rachel, the lead teacher. She has been able to go into a pre-K classroom, so students as young as 4, and a kindergarten classroom. And she is teaching those students about inclusion, about tolerance, about diversity. And just think about that at a 4-year-old level, them starting to understand that we are all different, that we have all different ways of showing our knowledge, and that's okay. And we need to celebrate those differences. So it's just been such an amazing experience to have that program here. I could talk on and on and on forever, but we really want the families to be able to come up here to highlight their experience. So Justin's gonna go back. I'm gonna move over, and I will introduce them. You guys can all come up. Oh, are you crying?
You're just
Oh.
really wonderful.
That was not planned. No, I'm very sensitive, but that was beautiful. So we have Lindsay, and she will talk to you about her family experience and her son, Michael. We have Amanda. Amanda is not only a paraprofessional in the building at Sandown Central, but her daughter also attends the partner program in Atkinson. And then we have Casey, and she'll be able to talk to you about her experience with her son, Aiden. All right, Lindsay, you're up.
Hi, everyone. My name is Lindsay Bleich. My husband, Matthew, and I live in Atkinson. We're long-term residents there. I actually grew up and went to Timberlane and graduated from Timberlane. So I won't tell you how old I am, but I've been there for a while. I also have 2 older children, Lena D, who is going to be 12 in March, and my older son, Miles, who is 9. And they both go to a public charter school in Salem, New Hampshire called the Birches. But today we're here to talk about Michael. Introduce you to Michael. He's the sweetest little boy. Michael is 4.5, and he was born with autism 2 weeks after the COVID shutdown. To say that I've had a difficult time getting resources for him in this state is an understatement. And in addition to autism, Michael is pre-verbal, has ARFID, avoidant restrictive food intake disorder, and he's an eloper, meaning that he'll run away at a moment's notice. But what I'd like to talk to you about today is how the access to special education programs like the one offered at TLC Sandown Central School will change not only Michael's life, but the lives of the other children in the district. In the beginning, we contacted the district to discuss setting up an IEP for Michael at the suggestion of a lovely woman with New Hampshire Family Voices. If you don't know who they are, look them up. They're fantastic. We already had an ABA program in process with ABA Centers of America in Salem, New Hampshire, where Michael receives therapy services. However, they're not centered around school, and they do not offer specific speech or physical therapy services, both of which Michael requires. My request for services was sent to Kim Rivers, the early childhood coordinator for the Timberlane School District and building administrator for the Sandown Central School. From there, a series of meetings ensued to determine if Michael was a fit for the criteria for the school district for autism to qualify for services. Once it was determined that he qualified, we had another series of meetings to determine exactly what his needs were and what the district could offer based on those needs. We were welcomed with open arms and felt very supported through the process by Kim and her team. Michael would start half-day pre-K in the fall and receive speech and PT through the summer. Halfway through the summer, Matt and I started to panic. Would Michael be able to participate in his class without ABA support? Would a paraprofessional be enough? Lots of other intrusive thoughts invaded, and we were losing sleep. We decided it would be best to contact Kim again and find out if we could arrange for Michael's RBT from his full-time ABA therapy to be with him during the day. Kim contacted us back with some interesting news. A new program was available within the school utilizing an in-house ABA therapy group called NECC. If we chose to enter Michael in the program, there would be full-time RBTs to assist each child like Michael. Skeptical like most parents in our situation must be, we had a few questions for him. Ever the proficient professional administrator, she was readily available to answer. Not only would Michael be provided with a full-time one-to-one RBT who would be on site at all times, but would also be provided with transportation to and from the school. Every day he would have lunch with his peers. He would spend half the day in peer inclusion classrooms, which is a fancy way of saying he'd join his classmates in pre-K. And they would also work with him on potty training, which is the big transition he's going through right now. And Kim further explained that he would continue having support with speech and occupational therapy on site during the school day. Fast forward to the beginning of the school year, and we've noticed leaps and bounds of progress in Michael's learning. He came home now singing new songs and making motions and signs that we had never seen before. He was being more social with his older siblings and making eye contact with us. He was making progress with potty training too, starting to actually go on the potty and coming to us dry and clean more often. He was even starting to sleep more consistently and sometimes even a full 10 hours. And he was following verbal directions, physically stopped when asked. He wanted to participate when his siblings played a game or chased each other around. And he even jumped on the trampoline. He started to mock our behavior and our words. Things that he had never said before or done before became prominent. He blossomed overnight. All this to say that we see the benefits of this program. We live the benefits on a daily basis. Not only do we believe that Michael is living proof, but we believe in the result of this program. And starting it so early in childhood development will have a ripple effect when the children in this program have progressed into middle and high school. They'll have coping strategies for emotional situations. They'll have the ability to say to us, or at least tell us, hi, I'm overwhelmed and I need a break. They'll be productive in school and tolerant of things that they have difficulty with now. We're lucky with Michael. He's considered to be easy as far as neurodivergence goes, but there are children who can't keep their hands to themselves and cannot emotionally regulate. And when those children get up to high school, they'll have no way of behaving as expected. They'll potentially disrupt educational and social situations. And their peers won't necessarily know why that's happening. We truly believe that behavior resolution improves outcomes for all students and that the resolution begins in pre-K with ABA, speech, and occupational therapies. And if it weren't for Kim Rivers and her request for us to join this program, Michael would not have made such progress as he has. She has truly been a wonderful light in the darkness and a true leader for these parents who weren't exactly sure where they were going or how to get there. I believe it's a combination of the Sandown Central staff, one-to-one ABA support with NECC, after-school sessions with ABA centers, exposure to neurotypical and neurodivergent children in his age group that has been the magic sauce. For every child, the road will look different, but every family in our state deserves the chance to experience the results that we have. And I thank you very much for meeting with us today. If you have any questions, I'm open to them. I don't know if you want to do those at the end, but
Yeah, maybe we can have Amanda and then Casey go. Awesome, thank you so much.
I'm here to talk about Emma. I have an 8-year-old daughter named Emma, who is now in her second year at the NECC program over at Atkinson Academy. She originally is from Sandown, but they have the program over in Atkinson. So she transferred there. Emma is autistic, nonverbal, and with the developmental and global delays, which greatly affect the way she learns along with the way that she functions in society. 2 years ago, the NECC program was proposed to me, leaving me extremely wary. When will Emma be with her classmates? Will she be separated from her friends, leaving her to stand out and made to be seen different to others? Inclusion was my #1 priority for Emma and always has been. Being introduced to this program also meant her having to change elementary schools and leaving some peers behind. After weeks of researching and deep consideration, I decided that the NACC program would be the most beneficial for Emma. Before Emma started this program, Emma would have a hard time completing a full day of school. She would have aggressions lasting a period of time up to 20 minutes or longer. Aggressions would include her hair pulling, biting, scratching, hitting. Emma also engaged in self-injurious behaviors, head banging, and biting. All of these behaviors were affecting her ability to stay into a classroom long enough to learn. Emma's teacher, BCBA, and staff have gone above and beyond with Emma's programs, introducing materials and ways that Emma can best express her knowledge. They consistently update me with how her day is going, follow up monthly clinics to show me the program she's working on and where she is in a percentage of mastering those programs. They also show me her behavior data and a graph showing how long her behavior episodes last, when they are occurring, and what behaviors are taking place during those times. This also displays how long they were from the beginning of the year to now how short they are. It's incredible to see the progress that she has made. A benefit this program has also provided with us is an in-home parent training once a month to show us what in the program is working and to be able to implement it in the home. It's such an important component to make sure school and the parents are all on the same page. As of my last clinic with her teacher, her behavior episodes are down to a total of 5 minutes a day. She's fully toilet trained and also spends morning meetings, snack, lunch, and all her specials with her gen ed classmates. There are also opportunities in the day where Emma's gen ed peers are given the opportunity to work in Emma's working settings, which gives both Emma and her peers the privilege of experiencing learning in different ways. I also have had the privilege to work alongside the NACC team as we transition a student into the program. For 2 months, I would spend my morning in the NACC classroom at Sandown Central. The student I worked with had the opportunity to interact with the students in the gen ed classroom as well as an NACC classroom. The progress I've seen the children make in just 2 months was unbelievable. There's also another student in the NACC room that I worked with last year, and I've been able to see all the progress he has made, and it brought tears to my eyes. I'm also so proud of these students, my daughter, and I'm grateful for the staff and that this program has become an opportunity for our students, our children, and our families. I know the growth that we have seen has impacted all of us as a community, not just as families. And it's a privilege to watch these children make new strides every day to receive a proper education and to feel welcome, safe, and comfortable in our society. Thank you.
Thanks. Hi, I'm Casey. My husband and I live in Plastow, and I'm originally from Boston, and we moved here a year ago, and Kim has been nothing but such a great support in our transition from the Massachusetts education over to the New Hampshire education. And I'm here to talk about my son Aiden today. Thank you for allowing me the opportunity to speak today. We sit before you as parents, educators, but most of all advocates for our children. I am my son's advocate. Aiden has autism, and this program is so beneficial for not only my son, but for all children who have developmental delays. I'm so fortunate that he is here at the TLC in Sandown. Before, our journey was to secure services for Aiden, and it was long and at times overwhelming. Navigating the IEP process to ensure that he had the right support felt like an uphill battle. There weren't many options for a child like Aiden, and what was offered didn't come meeting his needs. He was at risk for becoming just another student at a half-day program that was only 4 days a week for 2.5 hours a day. He had little to individualized support. But then this program was approved. This life-changing program, which was partnership with NECC, encouraged on Kim Rivers' behalf. I will never forget the day that the school reached out to me and told me they thought that Aiden would be a perfect fit for this program. It was as if someone finally saw Aiden, not just for a child with challenges, but for a child with incredible potential. I remember crying to Kim at Aiden's IEP meeting and feeling like God truly answered our prayers. Since joining this program, Aiden has made remarkable progress. He's begun to talk more, something that seemed so far out of his reach. He's coming out of his shell, starting to make eye contact, and most importantly, he loves going to school. Aiden comes home talking about his teachers, Miss Rachel and Miss Lissa, and his friends. These are milestones that seem small to some, but to me and families like ours, they're monumental.
The structure and support that this program provides has made the difference. With a one-on-one aid, small group settings, and targeted therapies such as speech and occupational therapy, Aiden is thriving in ways that I can never imagine. It's not just about academics. This program from the New England Center of Children at the TLC Sandown Center has given my son confidence and a voice, allowing him to engage in the world in ways that are meaningful and fulfilling. I shudder to think what Aiden's experience might have been without this funding in this program. He would have been overlooked, another child who didn't get what he needed to succeed in life, but instead Aiden was given a chance to grow, a chance to learn, and to be seen for who he truly is. We are so incredibly blessed and grateful that Aiden was chosen to be a part of this program. It is a testament to what can happen when schools and communities invest in what children with special needs actually need. The impact of this program doesn't stop with Aiden. It extends to our family and to everyone who gets to see him thrive. Thank you for believing in this program, for seeing its value, and for giving families like mine hope for a better future. I urge you to continue supporting programs and properly funding schools like this, because every child deserves the opportunity to reach their full potential, just like Aiden has. Thank you.
Thank you, Casey. So. All the, we needed the tissue here.
I'm not using it right now.
Sorry.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Thank you. Yes, yeah.
So you would reference your experience before with supports that don't work versus supports that do work. And I just wonder if you could just really briefly kind of elaborate on the experience. I mean, because it's such a tough thing when you're a parent of a kid with special needs, be advocating for your kid when the system says, well, these are the supports we have, and your kid has to fit in these supports. And if it doesn't work, so just can you tell us just a little bit of like what it was like before versus now in terms of being able to get the supports that he actually needs? This is just from a menu that they were just checking the box.
Yeah. So originally, when we were in Massachusetts going through the IEP process, this is all I have to base it off of, but they put Aiden in a program with 15 to 18 students for 2.5 hours a day. And, you know, my son was in an ABA program and it was a very small setting and he had one-on-one and it was very geared towards what he needed day in and day out. In the school system, I expressed that I needed something that was smaller for Aiden. He gets very overwhelmed, he's very overstimulated. And I felt as if they were just pushing Aiden into a classroom that was too big and didn't have enough staff who were trained to help him. He has sensory degradation disorder. He had a tough time talking, and I just felt like he was gonna get lost in being in such a big setting. There was one teacher in that classroom and he wasn't gonna be able to even have a one-on-one. They said he was too smart and he passed all of his, you know, exams, and I just knew that he needed to have at least even one-on-one or just being in a small group setting to help him in other ways, that I just didn't want him to get lost within the big group of 15 other students. It was just too overwhelming for him. You know, I can't even go to the grocery store with Aiden when it's too overwhelming. I knew if he had a hard time in such a big group like that, then if he didn't have a smaller group, it would have been difficult for him. So, yeah, that was one of them.
How old is Aiden?
He's 5. He just turned 5 in November.
I asked Raj to take my pulse, he'd probably run for an AED. So as stoic as I appear, you really hit home with me. My son in 2005 was diagnosed with autism. My experience was far different from yours. So Kim, I'm very thankful for what you did. Focus on your child's strengths. We went through a battle. The commissioner could probably look up the number of complaints I filed with the DOE, the due process I did. And I got to a point where I just stopped. And I just said, where's the Walmart model? You know, we go to Walmart and the person says, welcome to Walmart. How can I help you? That's what we should be doing with every child. with disabilities or without. So, the things I went through, the things you're explaining, especially with your son, aligned very closely, with my son. I will tell you that, he just accepted a position. He just graduated from WPI, with a master's in aerospace. He's being hired as a flight dynamics engineer. He's nerdy as hell. He taught his math teacher in senior high school a lot about deep level of calculus. So what I guess what I'm getting at is that staff found his strengths, and that's one thing I always focused on. Focus on your child's strengths. Those weaknesses are gonna follow in right behind, and they're gonna strengthen as well. So, again, thank you very much, Kim. I very appreciate what you've done.
I'm sorry you had that experience to begin with. It doesn't need to be that way.
And but this is what was avoided, wasted energy. And there's a lot of wasted energy there. So fortunately, I ran into the Institute on Disability, UNH,
Oh, yes.
and went through the leadership course. I just recently ended my 15-year term on a local school board, and here I am.
Thank you for your hard work.
Thank you.
I would like to explore how to expand it. Because when one of my employees in my company, senior engineer, when he had a son, this was long back, when he was 2 years old, he was tested and he couldn't get support here. He moved to, even though my office was in Milford, New Hampshire, he moved to Sharon, Massachusetts, because the school system had a program. And he used to drive up from Sharon for an hour and a half every day. And Tony now is just joined with UMass for mathematics. He's just, a wonderful kid. So the town was attracting, people and the town. And this actually has certain business and development value within the town. For specialization, something like this.
So Kelly Brooks, she's a special education director in Timberlane 2 years ago, and I've only been in Timberlane for a year and a half. I started in July 2023. So previous to that, she had done a study with the New England Center for Children, had somebody come in and really look at the supports and services that the district had for students with autism. And the students that were in the district, they lived there, but they were placed in out-of-district placements. And really it was, how can we give the students what they need in our district? And that is why they had that partnership with the New England Center for Children. And they started with Atkinson Academy because they had some first, second, and third graders that needed to be there. And by bringing 3 students who were in an out-of-district placement back into our schools, having all of this benefit of being with their peers, the district actually saved money because we're paying for this program and kind of all of those things that Justin talked about come with it. And then when we saw that benefit, we then looked at our students who were coming to us from early supports and services, or our current students who were already enrolled in pre-K, and we looked at their needs and we thought, okay, in 2 years, if we don't give the students these supports, we may be looking at an out-of-district placement for them. So Kelly, again, was able to work with Justin and kind of find that money to support this New England Center program for the early childhood program. What we're going to be running into, and I think what other districts may be running into as well, is we now have 6 students in the elementary school program. We have 6 students in our preschool program. The ones that are in the elementary school program aren't going to middle school for another year. So we're looking at starting a program at the middle school because we want some place for these students to be able to go and stay in district. But we're finding that our needs at the early childhood, we're not gonna have enough kids move to the middle school to make room for the students that we have right now at the early childhood program. So to your point, we do have, a continuum of services in the district. So we do, as staff, we have certified special education teachers. We have paraprofessionals that are trained in discrete trials and a lot of this ABA therapy. It's just not to the same level as the New England Center. So sometimes teams need to make tough choices and we go through criteria and we have, conversations with family. But ultimately, it's not just this or nothing. We do have a continuum of services that are offered. So it really comes down to funding. I think another piece of it is space in buildings, because we are dedicating a classroom to this program. So for some of our schools that may be a little bit more, overcrowded, there just isn't that facility or that space for them. Which is why the elementary one is at Atkinson Academy, but we have students from all of the other towns, Danville, Plastow, or Sandown, going to Atkinson. And the same thing, Casey said that she lives in Plastow, but we have that program here at Sandown. So even though it's a different town, it's still within the school setting. So it all comes down, again, to kind of the logistic things.
Is this an inclusive environment?
It is, yes. So there is a separate classroom. The students have individual workstations. So if they're doing their discrete trials or their, task analysis type work, then they can do it in that classroom. But then we always want the students to be with their peers as much as possible. So just think about, if you have any grandchildren or nieces and nephews who maybe don't know how to play with blocks, like they just don't know how to make a tower. So in the NECC partner classroom, we can teach them how to make a tower. So when they go into the classroom and play with their peers, they truly are playing with them and they're engaging with them. And you wouldn't get that in an out-of-district placement.
One thing I advocated on IEP was, my son was to have a friend. And that was a battle, believe it or not. Friendship is what's gonna carry children.
We're starting at 3, 4, and 5.
I don't want this to come across as a thoughtless question. I'm just curious, in terms of, are you seeing the need for services increasing, staying the same? You were identifying earlier, so
Right.
it's increasing.
It's an interesting question. And I think yes, however, I need to say the I think part is because students that are or children that are identified before the age of 3 are through early supports and services. So Easter Seals or Children's Pyramid. And they do have an obligation to let us know if they feel like a child will be transitioning to the public school. But it's sometimes like, it can be like 9 months out. So we don't really know the pool of students and their needs. However, this past year, over the summer, we did evaluate 25 students from early supports and services. We've actually had to open up another preschool classroom because of the needs of the kids. And it's not just the volume, it's also the students are coming with more significant needs. Not as much functional communication, more significant behaviors that we're seeing. And we're trying to meet their needs, but so it's kind of a yes, I think so, but I really don't know, like in 2 years, what that population of students will be like.
Yeah, I just want to follow up on that. So we have a lot of education researchers who are trying to figure that out. We're seeing this around the country, this sort of increase, and this would probably just be anecdotal on your part, but there's some speculation that it's pandemic related, especially with the socialization issues, but just sort of any thoughts on the sort of trend lines that you've seen, and are you concerned that we're going to see just a large number of a larger sustainable portion of kids who have these issues that are really complex?
I do, and again, I'm not a researcher, done some reading. If you have not read it, Anxious Generation is a really good book. It talks a lot about, a little bit about the pandemic, but more just about social media and cell phones and kind of all of those pieces. So children today are not the same as children that were growing up, in the 80s. I think a lot of people can say, well, before the pandemic, it was better. So I don't think it's necessarily because of the pandemic that kids are changing. I think it's because of all of that technology that started around in 2010 and just using iPads and things like that. That kids are changing. Their attention span really is not as long as it was beforehand. Students who have ADHD, sometimes their attention span can even be 2 to 3 years behind that of their chronological age. So when we're talking about working with a kindergartner who's 5, if you put some attentional issues in there, really we're working with somebody who's, kind of at that 2-year level. And not cognitively, but just in that ability to sustain attention.
Follow up, I know we have to move on, I'm
Yeah.
just sort of curious of your thoughts on this. Are you seeing, I've read it, it's just generation 2 and it's alarming.
It is, isn't it?
Yeah, so I would expect to see a lot of kids in middle school
Mhm.
have the ADD issues, the phone addiction issues, the anxiety that comes from all of that stuff. Are you seeing kids preschool with this kind of stuff? Are you seeing kids on devices? Like, I'm just curious what you're experiencing.
Yeah, I mean, obviously not in school, but
Yeah.
we're seeing it, and we all know that. Having your child look at something for 15 minutes while you're cooking, like it's there, like technology is not going away, but I think it's just the frequency that it's being used. When children are on tablets as young as 9 months old, like a tablet gives you like a frame of reference, like your brain knows where to focus. Even students like watching TV, like your brain knows where to focus. And when you take that frame away, we're seeing kids just don't know kind of where to focus. And suddenly their brain is taking in all of this other information that's around them and not being able to kind of filter in, what's important and what's not important. So even though they're 3, we're seeing 3s with less attention than they had years ago. And I was a preschool teacher back in 2005 for 9 years. So I did this job for 10 years. And even within those 10 years, I could see students changing. And a lot of that had to do kind of with that technology piece. It's a different kid. And education needs to change.
One quick question. It's probably got a long answer. That might be like a longer conversation post the meeting, but I know that out of district placements can be a volatile thing for local school districts, right? All it takes is all of a sudden 3 families moving into a small district and like budgets get blown. And how, like, not to get gauche about it, but like there's the ones and zeros of how has this impacted like the staffing model, the partnership with NECC?
So we have the lead teacher that comes with NECC. The district is responsible, like Justin said, for finding the tutor. So each child is assigned a tutor, but the tutors work with different children throughout the day. We would love it if we're able to hire those tutors through our district contracts, but unfortunately, our rate of pay is just not competitive for paraprofessionals right now. I think you'll find that throughout the state. So we needed to fill those positions. So we've got to contract agencies, and contract agencies, we're paying more. Yeah.
The model is really that, you've got your para educators that the NECC is sort of like managing like what the program ends up looking like, the programmatic support, is that right? I'm just trying to get my head around like what the.
Yeah, do you understand the question a little bit better?
Yeah, I think you look at the lead teacher as the expertise right there. And yeah, those paraprofessionals and tutors are functioning within the capacity of that expertise. To Kim's point, there is a challenge for us in terms of we have to contract those positions now as well. To move to a point where we can hire them within our own system and have them be our people. Like that's that next challenge and next step for us.
So it wasn't like an up and staffing, it was a redistribution of how you're leveraging.
Correct.
Staff. Okay.
Yes, we did not have to add any positions to the school district to do this.
It's fantastic.
And I'd like to follow that, Justin, because you had mentioned getting this, financial savings in this. Can you just explain how that works?
Yeah, so if you think about just an out of district placement and what that can cost. And if you look at, we have a program in our district that's running 6 or 7 kids, depending upon the needs of those students. So if you just break down those ratios, and it's really about that savings of transportation, that's a big portion of it. But if you can build it to scale a little bit where it can be a cost savings for the school district. And I don't want to just say that's not the only reason, and all the other benefits that we've kind of talked out today. So there's a win partnership here.
Well, yeah, and I think that's really interesting because I think in the past, and maybe this was a scale issue, right? Maybe you just didn't have enough kids with these needs. In the past, it seems like the out-of-district placement was the way to save money. You would, right, because you didn't have enough kids to do an in-house service, right? But if you're hitting that tipping point where it makes more sense to do this in-house, I think that's just maybe a really interesting model for a lot of districts to look at. Does that make
And
sense?
I would, yeah, absolutely. And I would even, like, I want to think about even something beyond that where school districts can partner together. And regionally, that maybe there's not, you know, depending on, we're a good sized district, so we can get behind this and do it long term, but there are districts that are not this size that could not scale this. And can there be benefits for them as well, regionally?
That was my question, because word of mouth travels fast when you have something good. So have other parents heard about the program wanting their kids to be in it?
Yeah.
Has that, have you had that, somebody come to
I
you?
haven't had any direct
Okay.
requests.
Yeah.
I mean, NECC is pretty well known. I think they're in about 50+ schools. A lot of those are in New Hampshire. But again, it's about, you know, getting to that point where it makes sense for that community to do that. And there's got to be a lot of variables that I think that line up and support one another.
Well, thank you guys so much.
I'm sorry, I just
No, go
wanted to
ahead.
add one more thing.
Yeah.
As you're talking about expanding this program and potentially making it bigger and sending, you know, getting into other schools. I want you to just think a little bit about, I could not find a speech therapist for my son to save my life. There were so, I mean, this might be pandemic related, but everyone was overrun. Easter Seals, Pyramid Kids, everyone who should have been able to help me wasn't there. And he's behind because of it. And that's why I say pre-verbal, not nonverbal. But when you're talking about potentially expanding this program, you've got to expand the speech and the PT services as well. You can't have one without the other, I don't think. So I think that's a really important piece to add that will attract people to the districts that you're talking about.
And if I could add on to that, the speech and the OT are district personnel, right, that NECC can access because they're right there with us as well. And that is also incredibly difficult for school districts to be hiring right now. Timberlane has 10 speech and language positions. 3 of them are our people. We're contracting for 7 others. And that's been long-standing history, and it's only gonna incredibly get more and more difficult. So I cannot echo that piece enough about those qualified clinical folks that could go work in other sectors with different compensation packages. But we really need those folks in school districts to be providing that supplemental services to these highly structured programs.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
So much appreciate your guys' time. I know it's a busy agenda for you.
Thank you for coming. Yeah, we'll see. I've got 2 of them. That should be okay. I'm getting another one. Yeah.
Oh, yeah, go ahead. I'm leaving.
Hi, right.
In fact, you should read everything that he's written.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's really amazing stuff. Okay, so we have our student in Jeffrey Ridge School Board hearing. We had on the agenda that neither party was going to present. And there was no request to do this in non-public, so we'll take this up in public session. So I'll just go ahead and kick the conversation off. Did anyone have any discussion?
We just mentioned this on your agenda.
Yeah, but it's not.
Okay.
Yeah.
Not required, but I just want to make sure.
But that was in case, we kind of.
I always put it there in
It's always
case.
the placeholder because.
I don't have anything to get.
Yeah, no, they generally are non-public. Is the family here? Is anybody from this? They weren't supposed to come, sorry.
The superintendent's here, and I think.
And they may be
indicated that
online, they may be listening, but they're, yeah.
If you want to speak.
We would go in.
Do it in public, in my opinion. I have no problem.
It's okay.
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay, great. Yeah, we didn't have. a
The
request.
district accepts the,
Hearing officer's report.
yes, the
Got
report.
it.
Okay. So there's really no big fight over this at this point.
I'm prepared to make a motion if I may.
You may.
I move that the state board accepts the hearing officer's report and adopts the hearing officer's recommendations. Second.
All right, thanks, Ken. Easy. Nate, you're up with assessment results.
Right. Invite two of my colleagues to come on up, Kristen and Kieran. So the commissioners let me know we only have about 2 hours for this. Keep it brief.
That's very good. Want to pull it up?
Yeah, why don't we start with, do you have a preference, accountability or assessment?
Assessment first.
Assessment first?
Yeah.
Sure. And that one's a little bit shorter anyway, because it's really just sort of taking a look at, what did the last school year look like? And then just a refresher, I think, for the state board of a lot of the data that we're publishing on iReport. At both the school and district level, but then at the state level. So we're just gonna show the state level,
Yeah.
knowing that you guys can on your own go in and do some pretty extensive, deep data dives into
I'm
that.
actually on there right
Oh, perfect. Yeah, so Angela, if you don't mind just showing the
Nick, can I just ask
iReport.
you a quick question to start?
Sure.
So we've had Explore, iReport, we've had this, and I've brought this up many times in the meeting to encourage anybody who happens to be listening to go to these things, because the amount of data that is available for the public to just pour over is really impressive. And you can learn a lot about the state, but a lot about your school district and a lot about your schools by going on here and seeing it. Do we have any sense of the traffic on these sites? I assume it's really low.
Depends on the time of year.
Okay,
When the legislative
Yeah.
session comes in, it tends to increase.
okay.
We can get you Google Analytics.
I was just curious.
We've talked quite a bit about, going in and pulling some of that background user data, and that's something that we could do. We build all this off of Tableau, so it's something we can take a look at, see if there's higher traffic points. We get requests constantly in the department for this type of information, and generally this is where we steer folks. So if it's, people looking to move to New Hampshire and they're interested, like, how do I learn about school systems? This is a great place to send those folks. And then, we generally do presentations yearly to House Education, Senate Education. So we know legislators are using the site when they're looking at data relative to policy decisions that they're making. So
It's a fantastic resource for any journalists who might be watching or listening.
absolutely, this is our fully transparent.
Yeah.
To your point, we put all of our assessment and accountability and then some data up here. We have
Graphic data, it's just.
financial data. Yeah.
It's really, what you can do, I played around with it for a while, like what you can do with comparisons on there is, there's a lot of richness in there.
Absolutely. So let me just start real quick. So my name is Nate Green. I'm the Bureau Administrator for the Bureau of Assessment and Accountability with the Department of Education here. I'm joined by two of my colleagues here, Kristen Crawford, who's the Assessment Administrator, and Kieran Wong, who is our Accountability Administrator. So we'll just start a little bit here with the assessment. And Angela, if you wouldn't mind just scrolling down a bit, on the left-hand side, or actually come up, so those sidebars are, yes, where you see that.
Whoa,
Oh, you clicked on one, I think.
I didn't do anything. Okay, what did I do? Sorry.
So just, we'll, very, very brief kind of overview here. This is the state report. This is mimicked at both a district level and at a school level. So you can go in, you could take a look at the Manchester School District, for example. You could take a look at the school that a couple of my kids are in right now, over at Bow Elementary School. But for the state, you see we've got ELA proficiency, math proficiency, and science proficiency. And that's showing at a state level across New Hampshire, what was the performance for last year? Up at the top, and you don't have to scroll
What are
up.
the x-axis here for the sidebars? What are the values for the three?
So that's just out of the total state population, what percentage of students were proficient for their grade level.
Okay, oh, so
Yeah.
okay, I didn't see any numbers there, that's why.
Yeah, it's not that, it's a little bit clearer on that TV there.
Okay, got
Yeah.
it.
Yeah. And then
Just
Angela,
for anybody, which site is this on?
so this is iReport.
Report.
Yes, yeah. The difference between the three, iReport is sort of the report cards. We have certain federal reporting requirements. iReport meets all of our federal reporting requirements for schools and districts in the state. But then we've also built out what are called iAchieve and iExplore, which allow you to do a lot more deep dives into the data. You can pull up multiple districts next to each other and do comparisons of the data. You can explore individual indicators against each other. So if you want to look at things like per pupil expenditures relative to English language arts proficiency, you can pull that data up and take a look at how those indicators relate.
And Nate, how does it compare with the national numbers?
New Hampshire tends to perform relatively high nationally when it comes to our state assessment data. Now, not every state has the same state assessment. So sometimes it can be difficult to compare, say, a New Hampshire assessment against Texas assessment against California. But that we also have information here on the NAEP assessment, which is done every 2 years, and that's a common assessment across all states. And New Hampshire tends to perform relatively high nationally on the NAEP assessment. If you click on just the ELA proficiency, that red arrow there.
Right here?
Yes, for most of these reports we have on here, we have what we call these flyouts. So if you want to dive in a little bit further, this is where you can take a look at how various student subgroups are performing. You can take a look at ethnic and racial groups. You can take a look at it by grade. You can look at it by sex. And for the most part, almost all of the reports that we have within here have both sort of the overall report, and then when you click into it, you can start to break that down into a variety of different categories. So again, we didn't want to spend a ton of time on this piece just because there is so much data here. We truly could spend a couple of hours just diving into this. But if, as a board, you have any questions, I encourage you to reach out to Kristen Crawford. If you have any questions in general about the state assessment or, how the state is performing longitudinally. Right now, the way this is set up, you can look at a single year, but you can go up to the top, you could change the year, so you can look at historical years. If you go into some of the other applications, you can look at more of those longitudinal trends. The iReport system, we put 3 years worth of data, so you can see a 3-year trend in there. But then on the Department of Education website, we post the full Excel spreadsheets that has all the data going back, I want to say, just about 20 years or so. So if you want to look at, a significantly longer period of time and do some more research into that, you can do that with those Excel files.
I'd like to see what was the impact of COVID, that, was there a big change?
So we have a couple of different analyses we've done on that, looking at, student performance pre-COVID and post-COVID and tracking cohorts. So not in iReport, but I believe it's either iAchieve or iExplore, but I can send you the specific link to it. We have it set up so you can follow student cohorts and you can see
What do you
that.
see? Was there, I'm sure there must have been a drop.
Absolutely, yeah.
I'm sorry to
Sure,
interrupt,
yeah.
but as well, I mean, the difficulty here is because you have a limited amount of time that's up there, but all the data that you would want to do that analysis is in it. And if you look at our press releases on the assessment results each year, particularly closer to those COVID years, we elaborated quite clearly how various cohorts of kids were doing. And as Nate pointed out, it's not just a matter of tracking the, like ELA, but we want to see how cohorts of kids have been performing over the years, right? Because they take the test in 3rd grade, but then the same cohort takes it in 4th grade and in 5th grade. And so it's not enough to just say, how are the 3rd graders doing? Because that's a different cohort each year, but we want to see how each of those, cohorts of students is progressing over the years to see what the recovery looks like.
And the general trend that we saw, COVID, we saw a huge dip in performance on both reading and math. Since we've kind of come back out of the pandemic, we've seen students, gain back a lot of what they lost in reading and writing. Math has been a much slower. We haven't seen the same gains and increases in math that we saw in reading and writing. And there's a lot of different reasons why that might be. We've made some guesses, we can look at some internal research if we want to, do some of that. What's really interesting though is in addition to student proficiency, we also have measures of student growth. And so when we look at the amount that students were growing post-COVID and compare that to typical growth pre-COVID, students were growing at a faster rate post-COVID. So even though they had this significant drop, the learning gains were occurring faster than just traditional learning gains pre-COVID.
It's the same cohort or the new?
If you look at both, yeah, both, looking at the cohort to cohort or just looking at, individual grades, yeah. So this is almost like a sales pitch. It's a plug for all of our free data, go here, take a look at it. There's quite a bit there and you can look at financial data as well. You can look at student enrollment data, demographic data. So this is all available here. And this is a great time. We tried to schedule it for you guys now because it's all been updated with the most recent school year data for last school year. So it's, just within the last sort of 3 or 4 weeks, we've done a full update of everything that's on here.
Does the department do any analysis as maybe on, like, say, for instance, a math program that a particular school uses? As a local school board member, I used to struggled, I started searching around for high-performing schools. So I'd go on the internet, I'd go to Northwood School or wherever to see, what are they doing? What are they using? Does the department do any of that?
So we do that on more of a case by case basis because the department doesn't have the curriculum that everybody is using. And so we have to work pretty closely with, a building principal or a school superintendent to understand what's their scope and sequence of their curriculum, what are the programs they're using, what type of professional development they're providing to teachers. Interlinks is a great example of that right now. They're doing a lot of work with their K-12 science progressions and their curriculum. And so I've been meeting with their administrative team to look at how can they incorporate a lot of the state data and assessment data from both, an Interlinks district level and a building level alongside that curriculum work that they're doing. So for us, it's less about the department kind of doing research and putting it out and more the department partnering with individual districts that are doing that research with their administrative teams. We'd love to do more of that, but there's only so much data that we collect.
I'll just share that, my son came home, we struggled with everyday math, for instance. It was a great salesman, it was very clear. But boy, to have parents in to understand everyday math at a parent session at night with free babysitting, which tells you something.
Babysitting helps and the free pizza always helps too when we had our Title I nights. Yeah. So is there any questions about the assessment data that we have posted here?
Nate, statewide, district-wide, and drill down to the school level.
Yes. Yep.
I have a question for just the user. When you're on the main iReport page for that school and district report card, and you've got the pull down tab and it's select school or district, it doesn't give you an option for statewide.
The state report is at the bottom, so
Bottom.
we basically
Yeah.
pulled that out just because.
There we go, state report.
Yeah,
Right.
it's just
Kinda like
because
using the
people are.
It's not the tab, right?
Yeah.
So you think you can get it. Would it be possible to put a, like the tab at the top that says statewide or something?
We can, yeah.
Yeah, there'd be a better link to
Most
get
people are
to,
looking
yeah.
for their schools. is what we
Yeah.
discovered, yes.
And if you were in at a school level or a district level, there are a lot of state comparisons.
Yeah.
So when you're looking at the state data here, if you went into say, like a Bedford,
Yeah.
you're gonna see, here's how Bedford's performing, but then there's also sort of the state metrics in there, so you can compare it against that.
Sure.
Yeah.
I just would be remiss if I didn't say it. I know we're doing well against other states or like in general and all that, but when I look at this data, like I continue to come back to, it's like 40 to 50% at proficient. Like that is a deep concern.
Not 42, yeah.
Yeah.
40 in math, right?
Yeah, like it is such
concerning.
deep concern to me that, and I realize that we have things we can do at this level, there's things at local levels, but that is half the children in the state.
Science?
That's like
In
67%.
science, it's even lower. One of the things that I want to make sure that as part of that conversation, we've had, the same discussion with House Education, because we talk quite a bit about, we've done so much work with things like the science of reading. We've really done a lot of work there. What can we do for things like math? What can we do for things like science? It's important to know, because some people will say, 40% of the state is proficient. So that means 60%, can't do math or can't read. It is at a grade level. So it's, when you look at fifth grade and it says, 51% are at that fifth grade level. The majority of the other ones are still at a fourth grade level. So it's not, can you do it or can't you do it? There's a kind of a range of students. I would love to do some more research into how close are those students that we're counting as not proficient? Are they on the edge of being proficient? Are they just another month or so out of fourth grade and they'll be at that fifth grade level? Or, are we talking about, they're at a third grade level, but we're testing them at a fifth grade level. So I think there's capacity to do more of that type of research.
Yeah, because looking, I read it, it's like, it's quartiles or quartiles, that right? Like, and then it's like, if someone could be 49 or 51 and all of a sudden you're shoved into like on grade or undergrade.
Right, so
Right.
quartiles is a rough tool
Yeah.
in terms of that, but I mean, I think it's true, it's fair as well, but we have seen a shift down, right? Because we do measure ones and twos are not proficient, then we saw an increase in the lowest performing students, I think, as well. In these results. I mean, and I think I'm gonna comment on math for one moment. And again, this goes a little bit, Ken, to your point. So, I mean, what kind of became evident in literacy was that the early education, right? So the kindergarten, first, second, third, fourth grades, we were not giving students tools, based on the science of reading. to be effective readers. But these are smart kids, right? And so they're using all kinds of coping mechanisms to succeed through kindergarten, first and second and third and fourth grade, right? But what happened is as those students advanced and they got into like sixth, seventh and eighth grade, the text became more complex. They didn't have pictures. They really needed to have, the ability to read and have phonological awareness, to understand the words that they're reading and comprehension and fluency and everything else. And so really a lot of that science of reading is just, can we go back and make sure that those students have the tools? My thesis is that it's the same issue that we have going on in the mathematics world in terms of not laying the mathematical foundation. In terms of numeracy and basic stuff. And we actually produced an entire video series for educators with a guy named Mahesh Sharma, who is not, many educators don't like him because he's a little bit bristly. But he gets that foundational work. So we've produced a whole training video series for educators on how to do that foundational work. Because it's the same thing. You don't have those basic numeracy skills. And then you get into pre-algebra and algebra and they say solve for X and they can't do mathematics, they can't do multiplication, they can't do division or whatever it is that they need to do. And I have been vocal here in the state, but I've been vocal nationally. We've been having these conversations of trying to push this foundational type of work forward, because I do think that that is where math comes off the rails also.
So I super appreciate that. And I think that oftentimes, like what I hear when I ask these questions at other levels is like, well, not all the students take the test seriously, or like a lot of people opt out, and the ones that opt out are the ones that perform higher. I hear a lot of excuses, is what I think I actually hear. And like, I really appreciate using the data to dive into like, what is the problem? Because like, I think this is year over year over year, we're seeing at least half the kids not proficient. And sure, maybe they're like just under, right? But if we don't dig under the hood of the data, I feel like we're admiring the problem as opposed to like what it sounds like is happening now. And I really appreciate.
But I'm gonna just weigh in one more time. I mean, so one of the work with Nate, and then for a while there I was on the NAGB board, the national board. And so, Nate has been connected up with the individuals at the national level, because if you think about it, that's even too rough of a tool to say that, here's the English language arts proficiency, or here's the mathematics proficiency. Well, what about math, right? Like,
Yeah.
Is it the numeracy, is it
Yes.
geometric stuff? And so Nate has done a lot of work with individuals down at the NAGB at NCES, delving down into the depths of what about math. And then he presented a lot of this result to curriculum and instruction people. Like, as we do this work, we're doing conferences and we're trying to show them like, here's what's in the data. And then the hope is that then they take that information and they bring it back into their learning environments, to your point, Ken, and are sharing with their local school boards. Okay, here's what we're seeing. These are the places where the kids have gaps in their mathematics. It's not just math overall.
It's great. I'm glad the consultancy is happening because like data's great, but if you don't know how what do I
You try
do with
to
it?
equip them to use it, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Well, I mean, I think another point, again, Caitlin, correct me if I get this one wrong, but I mean, we have an entire program. We do training sessions on iPlatform with educators. Like, we basically teach them how they can use the data to understand what's happening in their learning environment. So we're presenting that to school leaders and educators across the state, because to your point, I could have a great iPlatform tool, but if they don't know how to use it or they're not accessing it. So for the last 3 or 4 years, we've run those training programs. And Caitlin wants to weigh in on that.
And just to plug an additional product, so the Department of Education has iPlatform, which has obviously school level detail, but we've just made a major investment in Pear Deck Learning, which is a tool the department has for all schools, free of charge to all of the schools, to be able to look at student specific data. It's aligned with everything we're reporting on iPlatform, but goes into a lot more metrics. They're allowed to use local data in that too. And so we're really excited about that tool, and we've invested in training for the schools on how to use that, as well as the platform itself. So lots and lots of tools available to schools to do this work.
And I think that's our right role as a state, is to equip the local education leaders and local school boards to have information, to ask good questions, to move forward. Yeah.
But, you had mentioned the science of reading. We had the presentation by the two
Yeah.
teachers who did the comic books, and, my question to them was that they went to education schools. They are fully trained, licensed professionals, and they were teaching reading the wrong way for many years. And it took sort of this outside analysis to help them understand that what they had been taught and what the system was teaching was wrong and was holding students back. And to Phil's point, the biggest concern here is the consistency, year after year after year for decades of hovering around 40% proficient, 30-some% proficient in science, around 50 in ELA. And that you've had these blips with the pandemic, but that is consistent for decades, right? It goes up and down a little bit, but the fact that we have this system, this sort of top-down system that can't seem to break through that threshold and get us to the point where 75% of our kids are proficient in English. All of our kids should be proficient in English. And that's the problem. And I don't think that any state has, I mean, we're better than most states when you look at this stuff. We have great teachers. We have great families. But there's something that's not working in this system as well as it should. I'll point to a Stanford University study on charter schools, which found that public charter schools were closing the gaps in achievement with every demographic group you looked at. The Progressive Policy Institute, a left-wing think tank, this fall published a report on public charter schools and how they have done an amazing job closing the gaps in achievement. And they did a really serious, thorough review of this stuff. And one of their conclusions was, and I don't know if they came to this conclusion reluctantly, charter schools were originally in the 70s a progressive idea. They became associated with conservatism somehow along that path, but they're really not left or right. But the PPI report you should go read it. It's progressivepolicy.org. They have this study and it just came out this fall. What they found is consistent with what the Stanford study found, was the more competition these schools face from an alternative where parents can go to and where education is taught a little differently, not only does it improve outcomes for those kids who go to that charter school, it can improve outcomes for the kids who remain in the public school. We now have multiple studies showing this is the case. And I hate to think that that's the answer. I think that the answer is just more competition. Because I like to think that the system can figure out what's working wrong and make its own improvements. And then there's a lot of dedicated people in the system that are working really hard to make improvements. But we're not seeing the same kind of large gains, those big jumps that a lot of public charter schools, not everyone, but problem charter schools. But part of the problem is the problem charter school, if it's really bad and it's not working, will close. We can see stuff working outside the system. We can see sometimes inside the system stuff works really well. We heard a great presentation today about how to think differently about special ed, right? So it's not that the system can't improve, but I think what we're seeing is, in this last election, you're seeing a lot of people who are just tired of waiting. And I think you got a lot of parents who are tired of waiting for things to get better. Again, we have excellent schools in the state, but we have, I think, an issue with trying to make those leaps in achievement. That I think a lot of parents who feel this is an urgency, and I'm not sure that sense of urgency is there in the system. When you look back at how long we've been hovering around these levels, and that's my biggest concern is we don't want to lose families who give up on the system and say, we want a way out. And trying to find a way to make those achievement gains within the system is just really critical. And I'm glad that you guys are doing this data because that helps us a lot, right? Being able to do this look back, being able to see, compare with the amount of data you have here, and sort of encourage you to keep doing it and keep doing the studies, because I think this is one way you'll maybe start to identify some districts that are doing things well. And you can see differences and bear down in the data to try to help other districts, right? So I think it's a good way to approach it, is looking at all this data and trying to find out, how can we within the system find what's working and share it. And I hope that our charter schools, we tell this all the time with the charter schools that are here. It's part of the mission and it's written into our rules, that charter schools are required to share their results and share what their best practices with traditional public schools. And I hope that ramps up, because I'm not sure we're doing enough of that right now either. So
I guess the point I was trying to make was that there are school districts, we looked at the average for the state. But in my research, I was looking for school districts as a local board member that were performing.
Yeah.
And I had to do my own research to find out, well, what were they doing?
Mhm.
And I don't say this to be competitive, create a competitive environment, but simply information. What school district has the most proficient students? What school is most proficient in math or what have you? But to make it, I don't know if it's possible to say what they're using for a program. So it's, the information's there. I will say that as one board member of 5, I would do my research and present it to my board. But I was frankly outnumbered in a sense, because a lot of other board members would want to rely on the administration. And sometimes it's hard for administration to change things because teachers are already in this curriculum or in this program. They have to go to the teachers and say, oh, we're gonna now go to this. And that's like the worst thing you can say to teachers who have just worked on developing curriculum on a particular program. So I guess it's really about getting the information. What does.
some of it's school culture too. I mean, I just visited ASD with one of my sons who's very interested in maybe going there. And the culture that they instill is one of the unique aspects of that school, in terms of the students, the expectations. It's really neat that you don't have to take a test to get into that school, like it's a random lottery. Obviously, there's a self-selection issue, but I think there's just lots of ways to think about how to maybe look at things that are working in some schools and try to adopt those.
Frank, I just looked at one district that I know personally that's high performing. In 2018, their ELA score was 77, now it's 74. Their math score was 73, now it's 66. Their science score was 65, now it's 60.
Which year?
So this is, you went 2018 to current, I think.
4.5.
Yeah, so that's pretty consistent across the board. In other words, like that is the consistent result.
Yeah, I was gonna ask Nate, I was looking at this graph, I think you can see it here, they're following a cohort through different years. And you see that the same cohort in 2020, they're always staying low in math after every year. So this is you're carrying on the same problem,
It could, in other words, we haven't solved whatever that gap was
Yeah,
that resulted has not been closed.
Yes.
Correct.
So every year they have only 39%. So though the previous cohorts and then the later cohorts are at a higher level.
Yeah.
They're moving down in different grades with the same low numbers. So-
But interestingly as well, like that's why one of the benefits, I assume you're looking at the cohort model. Yeah. I mean, but there's gonna be differences among cohorts as well. And so that could be the attributes of that cohort versus an attribute of another cohort as well. So you also want to look at it both cohort wise and then across the grade levels also.
Right, yeah, this is for grade 4.
Yeah.
Now they're in.
Maybe we might hit your 2 hours.
Sorry.
It was only 50%.
So I'm sorry, so Anne has Anne's a follow-up, sorry.
Based on that, if that's consistent across the state, are we having any success in identifying why?
Well, I mean, I think, so English language arts, like we're making sure that with the science of reading, we're making sure that the foundational principles are in there.
Now, we were doing well and now we're not doing well, and we know we had a pandemic and something happened and.
So, but
has the
again,
Teaching model changed? Is it just the?
no, the instruction model hasn't, substantively changed, I don't think. Actually, so Nate, do you want to try that? And then I'm gonna come in.
Sure.
I think I might be too
Yeah.
high for Anne anyway.
And I know, so, I'm gonna do another presentation right after this one where we kind of dive into absenteeism, but I think there is a correlation between what we see when we look at student absenteeism, regardless of pandemic effects, and things like the pandemic effect, where we know kids weren't getting the same level of in-person instruction. And so when you don't have some of those fundamental skills at that grade level as you're moving through, it becomes exponentially harder to build those fundamental skills with those cohorts of students as they go through. A lot of it is about instructional time. A lot of it is about meeting kids where they're at and getting them those skills so that you can build onto that as you successively move up through those grade level expectations and the standards.
And then I'll just continue then. So and what we've tried to do in terms of add-on is we've, again, trying to give them access to the data so they can see that as well, right? So it's transparent to everybody in terms of what's going on. We've, focused a lot of our, these are, point in time, outcomes or results for the kids. But the other thing that we've focused on, and again, it's a lot in these press releases as well as the student growth percentages, so the SPGs or the SGPs. Which is because what we were really after is because of the decline, what you need to do is you need to see an acceleration in growth, right? And so, and there's a measure of, 50 means you're at the same growth level. So we basically looked at, I think it was 2019, the growth model up to 2019, and then you have the gap, and then we're looking at the growth model after. Because if you'll never catch up, right? If you just keep on the same growth curve, there's not enough years to get the kids caught up if you're just growing at the same level, right? Because each year I'm adding on something, so you have to accelerate the growth. So we focus a lot on, just having the same growth trajectory is not sufficient. You have to accelerate that. And so we saw it in, and it's in the release date. I don't remember it all, but I think it was like 8th grade English language arts had a high growth percentage. But you have to see okay, so who's growing and who's not? So it's not. So those are, again, kind of point in time overall, but then, okay, so underneath, 8th grade class seems to be doing okay. 4th grade class, we got a problem. These kids are underwater and their growth, not only are we not growing, we maybe are not even at the same growth that we were before the pandemic. In terms of what is happening for those students. And so we're trying to, support the schools and the school board, local school boards who are trying to get this done with the information to say, here's what's happening among your cohort of kids. And I'm assuming that most schools, and maybe you can talk about this, Nate, they have gone back to model of instruction that was in place before the pandemic for the most part.
And I think one of the things that, you talked about making comparisons, looking to see who's doing what out there and who's doing a really good job of doing what out there. We worked with a superintendent this past year who, went in, used iAchieve and iExplore to say, who are the schools and districts that have the same percentage of free and reduced lunch kids as us, the same numbers of enrollment, right? If you're a small school, you're not going to compare yourself against a large urban high school. But they took some of those criteria and said, okay, so who matches our criteria? And then what are their scores? And they found 3 other districts that were similar to theirs, but had higher levels of performance. And the superintendent called them and said, what are you guys doing? Right? So I think that's another way that you can use this data to say, not just compare yourself to the state level, because there's huge differences from, Berlin to Bow. But find the places where this district is similar to our district. How do we compare? And then what can we learn from each other? And I think that's been a great use of the data.
Yeah, I agree with that entirely. I think that's one of the reasons why I was very excited to work with Mark, who's sitting back there, on the school district spotlights, because every one of them is fascinating. We learn stuff that works. And hopefully this just gives, not only gives them a pat on the back and some recognition for their achievement, but hopefully we're able to share some of these ideas and these best practices, because we're finding a lot of districts are doing really interesting things, and we want to be able to share that. All right, so maybe we should move to the next topic.
Yeah, so why don't we touch briefly on accountability? How we do it on time?
We're way behind, so.
Perfect. So Angela, do you want to just pull up the accountability presentation? Yeah, perfect. So Kieran is gonna run this, but essentially this is our federal accountability system. So we're on a 3-year cycle. We have specific indicators that we measure, and we identify schools based off of criteria through the state ESSA plan. So Kieran's just gonna walk us through where we're at after the 2024 school year.
All right, so we'll start with some background information relating to indicators that we collect, as well as long-term goals, and then I'll go into the results of the 2024 federal accountability cycle that we just implemented. So here are the indicators that we are required to look at per federal law. So for elementary and middle schools, we look at academic achievement, growth, English language proficiency, and equity. So what's important to remember here is that academic achievement indicator is the proficiency, or is just looking at the summative assessment results. Whereas growth, ELP, and equity is following the same cohort year to year and looking at the growth that they're making just in different assessments. So for example, growth is looking at their summative assessments such as NHSAS, whereas English language proficiency is looking at the growth on the access assessment for English learners. Equity is similar to growth in terms of the assessment that it uses, but it focuses on the lowest quartile of students and the growth that they're making versus the rest of the cohort.
And so just to kind of talk a little bit about that equity indicator, it's a weighted indicator. So if your lowest performing students are growing at a faster rate, that equity value is going to be higher because you're focusing on the students who need the most amount of growth in your school district. So having a high equity value means you're doing a lot of work with your lowest performing students.
At the high school level, we have the academic achievement and ELP, which are the same, except that the achievement indicator is the SAT results for 11th graders. We look at the graduation rate, which is a mean of their 4 and 5-year adjusted cohort graduation rate. College and career readiness indicator is looking at the percentage of 12th graders that are meeting at least 2 CCR markers. So these markers include things like scoring, getting a certain score on AP tests or ACT scores. It also involves career aspects such as completion of career and technical education programs or apprenticeship programs.
Oops. Okay.
And under ESSA, we are required to identify 3 different types of schools. So comprehensive support and improvement, CSI, targeted support and improvement, TSI, and additional targeted support and improvement, ATSI. CSI is at the school-wide level, whereas TSI and ATSIs are at the subgroup level. So CSI, you're identified for CSI if you are lowest performing 5% of all Title I schools, or if you are any high school, regardless of the Title I status, whose graduation rate falls below 67%. So there are basically 2 pathways to CSI for high schools. And if you're an ATSI Title I school that does not exit its status within 6 years, at the beginning of that 7th year, you automatically become CSI. So in New Hampshire, the next year that's going to happen is in 2026 for schools that were originally identified for ATSI back in 2018. TSI is similar to CSI, except that it's at the subgroup level. So it's basically schools with a subgroup in the lowest performing 5% for that particular subgroup for 2 years. And ATSI is a school with any subgroup that falls below the statewide cut scores for all available indicators. And these cut scores are just set at the statewide level, and they serve as benchmarks for identifying ATSI schools, as well as exiting CSI and ATSI schools. Oh, and CSIs and ATSIs are identified every 3 years, and TSIs are identified every year. This year, we only identified TSI. The next time the CSIs and ATSIs will be identified will be in 2026.
I have a quick question. Do we have any CSI schools that are CSI because of that graduation threshold below 67?
Coming up in
The majority.
Oh, okay.
Also wanted to just give you a just overview of the long-term goals and interim goals that are set. So these are the goals that were set back when the state ESSA plan was first drafted. So our goal at the statewide level is that about 70% of students are proficient in reading, 54% is proficient in math, and 65% of English learners progressing towards English proficiency by year 2027. Our goal for graduation is also that about 94% of students are graduating within 4 years by 2025. And we also have the interim goals for every single year up to 2027. The reason that the 2020 and 2021 goals are marked as COVID is because for those the first 3 categories, we received a waiver from the U.S. Department of Education during the COVID year to just continue with the same goals as 2019. Go to the next one.
Maybe you can skip over the recent changes if you want to go to the lists of the schools.
Yes,
Just in interest of time, I'm thinking.
This is actually missing someone. Oh, there you go. Yeah, that's better. Okay, thank you.
Okay,
Yeah, thank you. So this is actually showing the year over year comparisons. I think this may actually answer your question about the trends over time. So it's actually comparing the statewide goals to what our actual data. So if you go to the next slide.
And this is all available in your meeting materials too.
So for ELA, the blue line is our statewide goal, and then the orange lines are where we are, and the 2 years are empty again because of those waivers from USN. So this is the trend line for ELA. Let you make your own interpretation. It's for math. This is for percent of English learners making progress. And this is for our 4-year ACGR. Again.
And just in terms of the graduation rate, when we talk about federal graduation rate, we have a very narrow definition. We can only include students who earn a regular high school diploma in 4 years. So if you're a high school student that earns a high school diploma your following year, so you stayed for 5 years, you graduated, but you don't count as part of the federal accountability graduation rates. This is only 4-year regular diploma. It also does not include students that are doing their GED, any kind of alternative diploma that they might be earning. So it's a very narrow rate. When we look at completion rates, we see a much higher percentage of students that are earning some type of completion from high school. I just want to point that out. This is a very narrow federal definition when we look at those numbers.
Nate, would you mind sharing 2 out of how many schools have exited?
Yes, I think that
next
that's, yeah, that should be in here. Yep. So this is the total number of schools here. So currently 16 CSI, 67 ATSI, and 14 TSI.
So to answer your question, last year there were 19 CSI schools, and out of those 2 schools exited this year.
And then Drew, if you notice there, so one of the high schools is identified for their performance, the rest of them are graduation rate. Now, part of that is because when we look at performance, again, these are federal requirements. We can only look at schools that have a Title I status. Many high schools in New Hampshire are not Title I high schools. So regardless of their performance, they're not considered. And when we say 5% of Title I high schools is 1 high school. So for CSI, we identify 1 high school each cycle. Anybody else that's identified beyond that is identified for graduation rate. And that's more to do with whether or not you're Title I versus not Title I.
And just for clarification, they get Title I funding plus they get extra funding for.
CSI schools receive grants. Yeah, so when you're identified through the Title I 1003A funds, there are funds available for things like school turnaround plans, improvement plans, and supporting the school to figure out, using their data, how do we start supporting students so that you can get out of that CSI status essentially. Yeah.
Thank you. So the next few slides just go into depth about what the specific schools. So again, just a reminder about what the CSI schools are. And then if you go to the next slide. Just explain the 2 different routes to CSI that I mentioned. And then the next slide has the exited schools. So these are the schools that exited this year by meeting the exit criteria. And then these are the schools that are continuing in their status. They were identified, the last time that CSIs were identified were back in 2023. So they're continuing in their status for elementary and middle schools.
And this information is also available all through iReport as well. So one of the things that, we're required to do in iReport is post a list of who are the CSI, ATSI, TSI schools. And then we also include information relative to the types of grant funds that those schools are receiving and the types of initiatives that the schools are using those grant funds towards. So there's a little bit more information in iReport relative to the CSI schools.
These are the continuing CSI high schools. TSIs, again, schools with a subgroup in the lowest performing 5%. These are the elementary and middle school TSI schools that are identified this year, as well as the subgroups for which subgroups that led to their designations. These are the high schools that were identified for TSI. Additional target, APSI schools, again, are schools with a subgroup that perform below the baseline cut scores, and I've just listed what their cut scores are for your information on that slide. These are the APSI schools that exited this year. So we have 5 that exited. Oh, sorry, if you go back to the previous slide. So the list of ATSI schools is quite long. 7 schools involved, so I included a link. This particular report is available on our NHS website.
And some of that too, you know, it's interesting when you start diving into that data, because we have to look at any subgroup that we report on. And then we have to identify the bottom 5% of schools in each of those different subgroups. Some of the subgroups are not actually performing that badly. And so if you look at, for example, things like Asian and Pacific Islander as a subgroup, there's not a lot of schools and districts that have a large enough subgroup there that it's reported out on. So it's a smaller group of schools. And in general, we tend to see some higher performance there, but we're still identifying 5%. So 5% does not mean you're at the very bottom of performance. It just means within that subgroup, these are the schools at the bottom 5% of that subgroup.
And lastly, just wanted to highlight some of the technical assistance and support that we're providing, because our office has substantially increased the amount of data office hours and support that we provide. So for every single school or district in the entire state, our office would provide one-on-one data office hours where an NHED representative will sit down with them and go over the data that led to their accountability designation, or anybody who does not have any of these designations that want to learn more about accountability, they can do so with us. We also offer data review trainings and other office hours at times when districts are going through an embargo data review, because we want to make sure that before we release any public data, the districts and schools also had a chance to review the data. So we offer a lot of support around that. We have a full course on Canvas on federal accountability, which serves as a one-stop shop for anybody in districts and schools to learn everything about federal accountability system. We also have a 1-minute accountability series, which is a public-facing video series that is like about a minute long that answers questions about accountability, such as what is the 95% rule, which tends to be a controversial topic. And this is something that can be accessed by the public, and districts and schools can use them to their benefit. We offer customized trainings for the legislature, school board associations, superintendents, charter schools, and et cetera. The engagement portion shows how we are working with our districts and school stakeholders to provide certain support. So for example, for Assessment Accountability Conference, we had quite a few superintendents or principals from a school that have exited their status, for example, and they shared their experience and specific strategies and just list some of the other ways in which we provide support. And the last slide should give you the specific links if you want to check them out at all. And we're having an iAchieve training next week. If anybody wants to attend it, please feel free to contact me.
Nice job.
I think we're at a great point with our data where we've been able to do a lot of development and create the tools. And now our offices with Kristen and Karen are really shifting into the technical assistance piece of it. Here is all this data that we have available. How can we help you use it? How can we help you understand it? What do you need from us to drive educational improvements in your schools and districts using the statewide data that we're now providing?
Well, I'll attest that in the past 15 years, I've been looking at the DOE website, tremendous advancement in data, tremendous advancement, so thank you.
It's a lot of work from these two and their teams, so we're very appreciative. Thank you. Yeah.
It's also presented in a very useful way.
You know what my vision was for that? I don't know if this matters, so.
Yeah,
I think you were in that part of that, maybe with Dina. So like, you know how you go to shop for a car? And like, you can like compare models and stuff like that. I was like, I want it to be like that. You know what I mean? Like, oh, I'm here and I'm here and I can click, and I can compare the stuff and see what's going on. And I think we're getting there.
Yeah.
And I'm just gonna add one more thing. So we have an additional enhancement coming that we're working on, which is gonna be all the finances of the schools as well. So we're gonna take all the DOE 25 information. That's all gonna be available in data visualizations also. So.
Most of the data that I saw were all outcome-based data. But you also have data on what kind of, what were actions that were taken. And so we can even do some correlation to see what's more, what's working and not.
We don't have as much there. Again, I think we're able to do some of that when we're sitting down and working with individual principals or superintendents to kind of understand like, how are they using the data? And then what are they doing in their districts? But you know, in terms of the specific inputs, you know, the initiatives that are happening inside of a classroom or that are being run in a school, we don't really collect that data. So we don't necessarily have a database that we can take and say, you know, we know that 40% of schools are using this particular program and the rollout, and kind of how does that compare to this data?
Yeah.
So that part of it we
Some
don't have as a
correlation
piece of this.
on
Yep.
results, yeah, because then it's easier to say, okay, there's a correlation on, you know, actions versus impact, you know, so we can repeat some of these things.
Mhm.
So we just, right now, this is great, you know, at least previously we were blind, okay, almost. Because now we have wonderful data to look at. Now the question is, how do you dig a little deeper
Mhm.
to think in terms of systems, you know?
Absolutely.
I think, although you have to be a little bit careful with that in education, and sorry, Nate, for saying this, you might get me in trouble, you might be mad at me today. Well, I mean, because what you have to recognize is that each school system has a different cohort, a different demographic, and different individuals that they're working with, and so. And I only say that in the sense that I've seen, and I think people who've been in education for any amount of time, you see people grasp for like, oh, if like, in other words, like Ken's going to, if I do what that school district does, then I'll get, you know, this outcome. And so you end up chasing something rather than really, there may be multiple solutions. And it's not like there's this magic bullet that you're gonna turn around and all of a sudden you're gonna see something different. And so I would just caution people chasing after the magic bullet to try and make something happen. As opposed to understanding what's happening in your environment and then heuristically kind of analyzing that in the context of the demographic and the system and the resources that you have to deliver a good result, so. Probably a little, not what you're looking for, yeah.
No, I think, so those are part of the data.
Yeah.
What you're saying is you look at more of the data to see the correlation.
Yeah.
Yeah, totally agree with you.
Yeah.
Totally agree with you.
Awesome. Great. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you both.
Yeah, encourage everybody who wants to know anything about public schools who's listening and watching to go and look at that data. It's fantastic. And on the performance stuff, I just thought it'd be useful we're talking about these gaps. This is from the Progressive Policy Institute study that they published in October on charter schools. I just think that's worth noting. And we're talking about how to improve achievement. They examined cities where charter schools reached a critical mass in student enrollment, meaning 33% or more of the students in those cities were the public schools and were enrolled in charter schools. So once you hit that threshold, what's the effect? And here's what I'll quote from it. In all 10 of those cities, overall student performance improved citywide, narrowing the gap with the statewide average of performance. Evidently, the growth of enrollment in charter schools creates a positive competitive dynamic with the traditional district schools, which have to up their game to attract parents and students. That's from the PPI report, right? So that's a center-left organization. And when you're looking at it at that level, I think it's pretty eye-opening because I don't think we have nearly enough charter schools in New Hampshire. I'd love to see, dozens more. But one of the things that we ask when we get these charter school applications is, we're kind of cognizant of where other charter schools are. So if you have, I think there's been some thought on the board of, well, do we really need 3 charter schools in one region, right? Maybe we want a charter school over here and we should sort of look at trying to have charter schools everywhere. But what this report suggests is, yeah, you want charter schools to be concentrated because you want to create that critical mass where if you're getting a certain percentage of the students going to charter schools, that does seem to, I mean, evidence suggests that will improve the outcomes for everybody because of those competitive pressures. And so I just think that's something for us to just have in mind when we're looking at this kind of stuff. So, yeah. All right. Anything else? Are you guys?
We got another one.
We got
Yeah.
another one.
Next.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay, where are we? Attendance. Oh my goodness. That's
So
what.
let's just a little bit of time. We'll talk to you guys about some
Okay.
research that we did over the past year and a half.
Great.
Why don't we do this? We'll say like, we're gonna do that and then we're gonna offer I know we've scheduled at least Rashish is gonna get a more in-depth. So if people wanna like dig
Yeah.
deep, we can invite you to another dig deep kind of a presentation.
Absolutely. Yeah. So I'm joined here by Thomas Bond. Very excited about that for a bunch of reasons. One, he has been great in helping us to really dive into the data and do some cleaning, work in R, do some interesting visualizations.
Give us his background. So you're a student at Northeastern studying mathematics. You're in your junior year, if I remember correctly. Yeah, that's all right.
Do you want to say what's next for you too?
Yeah, I'm starting a 6-month co-op at John Hancock Life Insurance in January.
He's been our intern for.
Yeah, right.
so
So we don't get you back. Is that what you're telling us? Sorry.
Yeah. I think he's moving
Not
on
yet.
to bigger and better, yeah. But we've been so excited to have, one, our first intern, but then our first intern to be Thomas and to do a lot of this data research with him, so it's been great, yeah. So what we wanted to take a look at was really, what are the impacts of absenteeism on student proficiency? And kind of how do those two things relate? I think this is something we're seeing a very large national conversation on right now. At the US Ed level, we're starting to see a lot of talk around things like chronic absenteeism and states being required to report out on different markers of absenteeism and chronic absenteeism in particular. So we had never really done kind of a comprehensive deep dive into connecting absenteeism and state assessment data. That's really what we wanted to do here with Thomas and this data. So we'll take just a little bit of time, show you some of the results we looked at, talk a little bit about kind of where we can go from here. And then if you guys have any questions, again, we're happy to take some questions now, but I know, Rajesh, I want to connect you with Thomas and you guys can really dive deeper into that data that we had. So Angela, if you want to just go to the next slide there. And this is probably difficult to see on this screen here a little bit.
Sorry.
One of the initial things that a struggle I would say that we ran into is in New Hampshire, when we receive calendars from districts, we have two different ways that you can measure a school year. You can have a school year that's 180 days, or you can have a school year that's a certain number of instructional hours. And so when we started to look at the way in which we were receiving attendance data, we have attendance data that's coming in by hours, we have attendance data that's coming in by days. And it's not always easy to take a certain total number of hours and attempt to figure out, well, how many days does that necessarily represent? And start to compare those against each other. So ultimately what we did was we really just started to look at percentages of a whole. So when you think about chronic absenteeism, if we say, our marker for chronic absenteeism is you missed 10% of the school year, that's an easy thing to compare whether it's 10% of 180 days or 10% of 945 hours or 990 hours. So a lot of what we did with this research was looking at percentages of school missed, as opposed to a certain number of days or a certain number of hours, if that makes sense. So what we did was we looked at a sample of anywhere between about 40 to 45,000 students across 3 years, giving us a total sample of about 127,000 students, where we're able to connect what we felt was really good attendance data for a full school year and data that we had on those same students with assessment scores. So if you were only in a New Hampshire school for 24 days or 26 days, it wasn't as meaningful for us to include those students in this data because it was much harder to get a percentage. Because if you're only in school for 24 days and then you've moved to another state, 10% of 24 days is not the same thing as 10% of 180 days. So this sample represents students who are full-time enrolled in a New Hampshire school for the whole academic year, who also took the test.
All districts?
Not all districts, because again, there were some districts where we
Most,
didn't
okay.
have great attendance data from that district. So rather than try to assume some of that data, we left those out. So it's a large enough sample of, again, about 127,000 students across 3 years. We felt comfortable making some judgments based off of that sample, but it is not 100% of the state. Yeah. And then we just looked at some of the subgroups. So male, female, SES is your free and reduced lunch population, students with IEPs, and then students who are English language learners. And we'll go to the next one. So for each of the 3 years, we looked at two metrics. And I'll just use 2019 column there to start out with. So MPA was mean percent absent. So on average, what percent of the school year did students miss? So of the total sample, the mean percent absent was 4.6. So statewide, for the students we looked at, they missed on average 4.6% of the school year. The second column there, CA, is chronic absenteeism. What percentage of the total students missed 10% of the year or more? So for that total sample students, 8.9% of all students missed at least 10% of the school year. That's what those two columns look at. So there's not a huge difference when you're looking at male to female. We found that to be true throughout most of the data. But there are some differences depending on the subgroups. So if you look at students with IEPs as an example, 12.6% of students with IEPs missed 10% or more versus 8.0. So it was a larger percentage of students missing more of school. And then if you look at the bottom, if you were both a student with an IEP and you qualify for free and reduced lunch, I'm trying to see, is 3 on the screen? Yeah, so 23.8% of students in that group missed at least 10% of the school year. So significant in 2019. If you take a look at 2022, right after the pandemic, 46.9% were chronically absent. Almost 50% of that student subgroup missed 10% or more of the school year. And you can see the numbers went up across the board. You know, we've got 25% of the total sample were chronically absent. So a quarter, 1 out of every 4 students in the sample missed at least 10% of the school year in 2022. We did see those numbers go back down in 23, but they've not gone back down to that 2019 level. It's still about double when you look at the total sample population. If you want to actually just go ahead and skip this one, Angela, because this is the visual of that data. So this is by grade. What we did, the x-axis there is percent of school missed. And then the y-axis is the math scale score on the state math assessment. So you see in each grade, there's a direct negative correlation between the amount of the school year you've missed and your score on the state math test. And that's not surprising. You can see as you go up in grades from 3rd, 4th, 5th, 6th, 7th, 8th, that 7th and 8th grade year is a significantly more negative relationship between.
The slope is increasing.
That slope continues to increase there.
And can I just pause for a minute? This is kind of goes to the point we're making about if you don't have those fundamentals, you just dig yourself a deeper hole and the hole accelerates.
So what we're finding in those 7th and 8th grade years is if you miss about 10% of the school year, that's a 30 to 40 point drop on the state test. In a lot of cases for students, that's the difference between proficient and not proficient. And when you go beyond that 10%, and this graph ends at 30%, what we found in the data is if we went beyond about missing 30% of the school year, there are fewer and fewer and fewer students in those categories. And so the data becomes increasingly kind of just wild. You might have one student who missed 50% of the school year, but they got a high score. And so you have sort of these outlier data points. But between 0 and 30%, you're seeing that much tighter grouping.
And so I think as well, and again, I think it supports the thesis relative to missing those early stuff. What you'll find is that you have the steep slope early and then it begins to level out, right? So it doesn't matter at a certain point, like you've got a certain amount of base knowledge and you haven't fallen further behind because you've missed more, like you've missed the foundational things that you need in those early, years, so.
Exactly. And then if you go, yeah, so this is the next one, the same relationship for reading and writing for your ELA scale scores. A little bit more of a negative slope in 3rd grade than it is in math. And that makes sense when you think about early literacy skills and sort of that 1, 2, 3, 4 grade level. But still increasing slope as you go up through into those middle school grades.
So tightly correlated.
It's incredibly tightly correlated, yeah. So this is really kind of where we're at with the research. We're starting to look at those same correlations, but looking at those subgroups. What's interesting is when you try to do those same graphs for your free and reduced lunch population, you don't have as negative as a slope. And that's because for a lot of those students, they're already starting 15, 20, 25 points lower on that scale score. So you're seeing students, who are not free and reduced lunch having that negative slope. But if you're already at day 1, starting 20 points behind, you're already at the point of, a regular ed student coming in at 10% of the score that they missed, which was a really interesting thing to take a look at. So now we're starting to dive into those subgroup relationships too. And again, I want to make Thomas available. Any members who would like to really dive deeper into this data as well, because he's been a huge help for our team in helping us do this analysis.
But do you also see correlation between math and language and all of them going down for the same set of groups.
Yeah, those are almost always pretty tightly
Tightly
correlated.
connected, okay.
Yeah.
Do you have any sense of, again, I've read different, I guess, analyses or speculations as to what's driving these absentees, post-pandemic. Any thoughts on what we're seeing? I know you're just looking at data, so you're probably not gonna get into the reasons, but it is, I mean, you hear from administrators that it's just incredibly frustrating.
I don't know. It's a good question. Both of my parents were teachers. They retired about, a year-ish ago, year and a half ago. But they said, that the 2 years that they saw coming right out of COVID, they practically had a different class each week. Because, you'd have these 4 kids absent this week, the next week it was a different set of kids. And trying to adjust your instruction to that, where you don't have that same set of kids week on week. And they didn't, for the record, didn't teach in New Hampshire, they taught in Utah. But you're seeing similar effects, I think, nationwide, which is part of why I think chronic absenteeism is becoming more of a national conversation.
Yeah, that appears to be what we're seeing is post-COVID, that just a lot of families are just like feeling, I don't know, this and that gets.
So one of the reasons I found the cause of this is that during COVID, suddenly things shut down. And a lot of kids did not have devices, connectivity, and space either. Okay, and teachers were still learning how to teach online. And there was a lot of disengagement because it was boring just watching, and they didn't have enough, it was coming in and out and such. They kind of missed out on a whole year of learning. And next year, they didn't have the traction because they didn't have the basics. I gave a TEDx talk on this topic. Okay, so the next year, then it becomes cumulative after that, So this has happened all over the world. It's not just here.
Yeah.
This is like a great natural experiment that has happened across the world, and you can collect the data anywhere, and you would see the same dip and the struggle.
Yeah, we're taking some of the data that we've collected here in New Hampshire, because we're seeing the same trends in Hawaii as well. And so we're gonna be doing a conference presentation next year between both New Hampshire and Hawaii to kind of say like, here's, talk about 2 opposite ends of the country between the East Coast and Hawaii. But we're seeing those same trends across our student population.
Alaska was the worst.
Or is
He has to go there to do the data collectation.
Several times, yeah.
Yeah, Alaska had the lowest chronic absenteeism numbers, and the worst numbers, I should say.
Okay, yep.
They were already at 49 and,
This was like, talk about your previous presentation, like, we're like, oh, what's the difference? What's showing up?
Yeah.
So much of it is just showing up.
Woody Allen.
Instruction is important.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I guess I don't, can I say, and Rashish and I've had this conversation, showing up is important.
Yeah.
But if you show up and you're only getting to 50%, we still have to solve the problem.
Yeah, we still have to solve it, absolutely. Yeah, yeah.
Just like,
That's a really
okay,
good point.
We showed up, now can we?
That's a start though, right?
Yes,
Like the-
right.
Well,
But just show up to what, right? This is the
Yeah,
point.
yeah, what are you showing up to?
Well, and also to the special ed presentation we had before, I mean, now we're seeing more kids not showing up, but a higher percentage of the kids who do show up have new issues, attention span issues, concentration issues that become a little more challenging. So it's complex. So anything else for you? Yes.
The one word I don't hear often, back when I was in school, we used to hear it quite often, called truancy. And I went, is this in
that's
part of your assessment at all, when students are actually truant? And my understanding was things have changed, that's 10 half days.
It is.
Unexcused absence, and there's a number of exceptions in the statute. But I think really what it narrows down to is an excused absence. Most of them would be due to emotional or physical issue, where the superintendent would excuse a student. So I guess, is there any information on the excused absences versus unexcused?
So given that, we've started to dive this level into the data and we recognize some of the limitations in historical data that we've had, we've put more things in place going forward where we're able to collect things like reasons for attendance and reasons for absences, can we do a little bit more discrimination between, are you a student who is out because you've been sick straight for 5 days versus a student who had a dance concert in another state and they were out for a couple days? There are a lot of different reasons why we know students are out. And right now, with some of that data, we have some students that we know are being put in as absent, but they're absent because they were up in the North Country traveling for their hockey game. They weren't necessarily absent, they were on a school bus at a game, but there wasn't that level of differentiation to say they're not in the building, they're not necessarily absent. Although you can make an argument that they still aren't in that classroom receiving that instruction.
Yeah.
So I think we're trying to get to that point with some of the data collection that we're doing, so we can make more finer distinctions with levels of absence. Yeah.
One of the things I do here prior to coming on this board was parents who go on vacation and take their children with them outside of school vacation. And does that end up being an excused absence? But I know I'm asking for more than what you've already provided, but.
But I don't know if there's a difference between excused or non-excused absence for the learning.
Here.
Yes, for the learning part, because I missed the class, it doesn't matter.
There would be if the parent made a effort to, so for the school vacation, vacation from the school year. If the parent said, and we'll get the materials and we'll do the homework and we'll make it up, right? That's a big difference between actual truancy. And I think one of the issues that we're looking at, probably post-pandemic, has really brought it to light. I wonder how many districts. So you see movies you see the Little Rascals movies, right? And other stuff from a long time ago. Truancy was a big thing, right? The police would come after you and drag you to school. That is not happening. Like, the cops are not gonna come take you back to school. So is there really any consequence? Or you hit those absences, you hit the truancy mark, you get a strongly worded letter from your superintendent, and then what? I mean, is there any accountability for the parents to get that student there? They're required by law to get the kid there, but are there any need in that? I doubt it. And so, that's a cultural change, a policing change, a social worker change, all that kind of stuff. And that's part of the picture too. Like, if parents decide they're not gonna get their kids to school and there's nobody who's gonna hold them accountable for that, they're just not gonna show up.
Yeah, historically for New Hampshire, it's always been that relationship between the truancy officer, the local police department, and the school district. We have regulations and statutes around, how do you build and create those policies, right, at a school board level to have that relationship with that truancy officer? But that's been the mechanism. It was interesting looking at some of the background research for this. In England, we saw they fined parents $1,000 for not getting your kids to school. And the number of parents we saw fined in like 2018, because that was the research that we were looking at was looking at 2018. This is a lot higher than I had expected. I can't imagine attempting to start fining people, but it was there. You have to think about what are those other mechanisms and, carrots and sticks. And if we're saying school is important and attendance is important and instruction is important, what are we doing to kind of help with that?
I'd also probably suggest that the increase in remote work for some parents probably could contribute to this. Because not only does it sort of reduce the cost of keeping your kid at home on any given day, because you might not have to get any childcare, but it might actually be easier for some parents if part of the routine is dropping their kid off at school and then going to work, and now they're staying at home all day. And so it's maybe just easier on a 1-day basis to say, well, maybe just this day we'll take off. And so I'd say as we see more return to office mandates coming back, that might be one reason that we're already starting to see in the 2023 data, the absence rates going back towards where they were. And since there's definitely more return to office mandates coming soon, I think we might see it continue to go down.
You sure you don't want to stay at the department?
Good job. I think that's a fair assessment, but for me, if I was working at home, my kids are going to school.
Yeah, it's not an option in my house.
I enjoy the time.
All right, anybody else have anything? Well, thanks, guys. That was great.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Tom, have you been in EXP yet?
Yeah.
I just got done with that project,
Yeah.
the construction.
All right, this seems like a really good time to take a 10-minute break. All right.
Yeah.
We'll be right back in a few minutes, just take a little break. Yeah, Pittsburgh, Clarksville, and Colbrook and Columbia area agreements. Anybody have any questions or issues with those? We need to vote to accept them. Yeah, those two, and then I think the Seabrook one, we didn't have to vote on, because there's no, I think we had to vote on that one.
All right, well, I move for the board to accept the area agreements for Colebrook and Columbia and Pittsburgh and Bristol.
All right.
And what was the decision, what was the C on the action items, the?
I don't think we actually have to act on that one.
I don't. It's no longer, okay.
That was just. Okay.
Good afternoon, Dal Bear with the Charter School Office here at New Hampshire Department of Ed, introducing, returning from last month, Granite Valley Preparatory Chartered Public School in Keene, Chris Smith, Liberty Ebright, and I believe two prospective board members. Committed, sorry, committed board members.
Again, thank you. Yeah, Christopher Smith, Liberty Ebright, and then we've also brought some committed board members with us, so,
Absolutely. My name is Derek Scalia. I am a board member for Granite Valley Prep. I have been involved in higher education for 17 years. I'm a parent, committed to education, have served on other boards before, and am also a member and ordained clergy of the Episcopal Church of New Hampshire.
Hi, I'm Krista Daniels. I am also a higher ed educator. I run actually a Master's of Science program at Antioch University. And I have been a Keene resident for probably about 25 years. I've been in higher education for about 20 years. And am also a parent of a 12-year-old boy. And am on the board for Granite Valley Prep. And I am also on a few other boards as treasurer in New Hampshire.
all right, and we're back today. We found, hopefully you've gotten our pamphlet with our couple of changes that we made to the charter based on what we gleaned would be your recommendations from last time to the governing section, or governance section, the disciplinary procedure, and then also that the civics and economics course. And we're here hopefully to have our charter approved today.
I like the filling out of the economics. Yeah, it was
Yeah.
more robust discussion.
Yes,
Right?
yes, I think so.
I mean, you could keep going, you know, but like you guys got the basics. Good. On I have one question on the board, and maybe I was just reading it wrong. So trustees, you've got minimum 25% parent trustees, not to exceed 50, 25% non-parents, and then you've got a minimum 5-member board, maximum of 9. But you have roles for 1 educator, 2 financial professionals, 1 lawyer, 1 founder, and 1 major contributor, so that's 6.
Right, but in the way that and again, we got this template directly from.
Sure, I'm just looking at it.
The way that I look at it is that someone could fulfill more than one of those roles.
Okay. So you could have a parent.
Right, or you could have a founder who's an educator, you could, yeah.
Fair enough. Yeah, we don't have hard separations for all those always, so you're gonna look at that. Okay. Anything else?
doing the same?
I am. I move that the State Board of Education approves the charter application for Granite Valley Preparatory Charter School.
Right.
Charter public schools.
All in favor?
Aye.
Congrats.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
We appreciate it. Thank you.
Okay.
Yeah, that was great. Thank you. Now we've got the hard part. but
Yes.
Thank you so very much. Appreciate
Good
it.
luck. I think that'll be a really neat school.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay. Yeah, we're gonna use that, but I wonder, do we wanna, yeah, that might take a while. What if we do, I think I have to speed the meeting up a little bit. Got one there. Hold on, Did anybody have any?
Well, you have the contract you could do.
Well, we could do the contract.
Although that's just staff, so.
I have questions about that. Did anybody have any questions or thoughts on it? I know we're jumbling around here, but on the Learn Everywhere. So,
Is Tim there?
yeah, is Tim here? I mean, maybe if people have things to get into. So on the two Learn Everywhere programs, did anybody have any
Maybe.
concerns to bring up or discussion or, questions with those folks?
My only question was, is it presented their first report? And as they have had no prior students, they had no evaluations.
Right.
I'm just, is there anything that we can do to help them and or are they doing to make themselves more?
Is this yeah, this is
Yeah.
it. I was a little surprised they didn't have students.
Yeah, I think Dean just has a whole bunch of
I know
irons
he's-
in the fire.
yeah.
Do you remember Dean?
Oh,
He used to work here, right? And so I just think he has too many irons in the fire, so.
Yeah, I mean, it's pretty big organization. So maybe you just, Tim, if you don't mind, can we just? Well, we could knock off a couple of things. Sure.
Anybody online?
Yeah, is it or Major Choice here?
Yes. Yeah, major choice
Okay,
here,
great.
and I invited Dean.
I thought that you might not want to sit through another long session if we didn't have any big issues with you, so maybe we can just get that out.
He didn't respond, so we can go with.
But I don't think anybody had any questions.
You don't have any questions, so.
Yeah, I mean, I
Okay.
think Dean's application was pretty easy.
Yeah.
But for Major Choice, welcome.
Yeah.
Thank you for having me. I really appreciate it. Again, my name is Brad Duquette. I'm a co-founder of Major Choice. And I can't begin to tell you how excited I am about this opportunity. We've had, last year, successfully put through a little over 100 students in our program. And the changes that we're making in these kids' lives is tangible. The kids come out of our course visibly walking taller. I can't begin to tell you what an impact and visiting, I've been visiting with a lot of schools here in the state. Everybody's open arms about the program. They need the help. And, even though we are focused on students with 504s and IEPs, we are excited to also be offering the students, the program to neurotypical students as well. So big impact, small company, big impact.
Can you share with us how if you have a plan to introduce yourself to school districts?
Yeah, so we are working with Voc Rehab currently, and they are helping us open up doors. But frankly, we're pretty social guys. So we're doing some door knocking ourselves. The good news is, again, parents are talking and the information's getting out there. I had a parent information session just last night, and everybody's telling everybody. So I'm excited at the next couple of years as to what's gonna look like for Major Choice. But we are actively going out, visiting with schools, sitting down with school counselors every week and talking about their needs, what we can do to help their students. And it's been well received.
Any other questions? How about a motion?
I move the State Board of Education approve the Major Choice Learn Everywhere initial application.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Congratulations.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
It's not getting done, the kids need it, you know?
So let's revisit as well. Anybody have any discussion on visit?
A State Board of Education approved the is.org financial literacy learn everywhere renewal application.
Second.
Aye. All right. Thanks, Tim.
And did we want to do the grade edition or?
Yeah, sure, since we're here.
Nicole McBain, I don't know if you need to speak with
I
Nicole.
don't think so. Did
Okay.
anybody have any questions on the Longview School grade edition?
I did.
Okay.
I got the impression it's a small school.
Yes.
And that all actually made me have more concern than less concern. It being a school that used to be 9 through 12, now they want to be 5 through 12. And it is outdoor learning, adventure, camping. So I'm a mom, and what comes to mind is I have a 5th grader and a 12th grader camping.
Yeah. Nicole,
Let me just see if she's online and I can pull her
she
over.
was gonna come in, but she got ill. so.
Let's see her, no. Oh,
I mean,
hold
so
on.
less so.
Or second.
I mean, one, it's
Oh, I'm sorry,
non-public
yes.
school, so really,
Maybe,
as long as they're
sorry, yeah.
fulfilling the number of days and hours, it's really what the authority we have over it.
Yep.
She's coming over.
Okay.
It's okay for her to respond.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely it is, yeah. And two, as
Yeah.
someone who has a child in outdoor, like a very outdoor focused school that
So
spans.
Longview is
I have-
one of,
I've never had any concern with the. Especially given because it is smaller. I think the smaller actually makes that an easier to contain or manage environment.
yeah, supervision. Yes, supervision. So
But-
man is available.
Hello.
Hi, good morning. I'm sorry I couldn't be there today. I am Amanda Reed. I'm the Assistant Executive Director for our agency. And to speak to your question, it actually is something we've already thought about in how we connect our middle schoolers and high schools. And to the best of our ability, we actually wouldn't ask a 5th grader to go camping with a 12th grader. We'd kind of stick to the grade level and age level requirements that are in the EDs. And even aside from that, if we were going to integrate our middle schoolers with high schoolers, we'd be very thoughtful about personality and needs before we would do that.
And robust supervision.
For sure, yes.
Any other questions for Amanda? All right, thank you.
Thank you.
I move the State Board of Education approve the grade.
Grade level change.
Grade level change for Longview School at Summit Center.
Second. All in favor?
Aye.
All right. Thanks, Tim. All right, so we're gonna move back up.
Move her back.
Go back, just go ahead and go on with Riverview. So at this point, I think we would need a vote to go into non-public session to discuss Riverview.
Move the 93.
91A.
91A.
C23. Yeah. C2.
32C.
32C. To go into non-public session under 91A. 32C.
Second.
Excellent.
Okay, we'll get a roll call though.
Cameron.
Okay, we'll go that way. Tim. Aye. Aye.
All right, give me a minute to get everything set down.
Young kids and I know the one-room schoolhouse is how it used to happen.
Yeah.
You know, now we have phones and
Here, back in public session, we are up Angela, are we?
We are back in public. We have to seal the minutes.
Wait to make sure we're.
We are back in public. Everything's up and running. Oh, did we unmute all the speakers, Diana?
Yep, audio's back.
Audio is back up and running.
Okay, we would need a motion to seal the minutes of the non-public session.
I make a motion to seal the minutes of the non-public session.
Second.
Yes.
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 Okay. All right. So any discussion or thoughts on review and what we should do moving forward?
I have a motion.
Okay.
My motion to put Riverview Charter Public School on probationary status for up to 1 year to allow for progress on or implementation of open items as discussed with this board, which shall constitute Riverview's remedial plan.
Those open items would include completion of the 5 audits.
And those open items will include completion of the 5 audits.
I think consistently maintaining a board that is in compliance with the charter and relevant law and rule.
So well stated.
Yes.
Relevant statutes and
Statutes
So he was
and
supposed to see all
regulations.
these beforehand.
Statutes and regulations is better, okay. I would throw out there, and successful completion of, board member training as provided by.
Through the department.
Through, yes, correct, through the department. Office of Health Charges.
And my motion. I stated I motion, but it's the state board motion.
Anybody have anything else that you'd like to add to that?
Meeting minutes?
Video plans to also include, providing visitors and publicly posting all, meeting minutes.
And a second.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All right. If you have any questions on that, I think it was spelled out pretty clearly, but we'll have a letter to you to lay it all out, so it's clear. You're free to go. Unless you have any questions for us.
No, I thought we were doing our 1-year audit, but we're
All right, 1 year. Let's do that. Go.
we're doing that?
Let's do it. Turn it over to you.
Can I turn it over to us? Beautiful. So for our first year, our start of year, was a challenge, but mainly for 2 reasons. We navigated construction delays and learned the new reporting processes that came along with opening a new school. We started the school year with 18 students. We ended our school year with 14 students. We graduated 3 of those 14 and retained 11 of those 14 for this current school year. Because of our limited enrollment last year, we modified our original staffing structure, which was going to include 2 teachers to 1 teacher to meet the budgeting requirements that the limited enrollment necessitated. We currently have 2 experienced teachers on staff and 1 paraprofessional, and we have 38 students enrolled. Our space is up and running. It has been for just about a year now. We received our certificate of occupancy right before Christmas of last year. And it is functioning very well as our school. We succeeded in attracting our target students and enrolled 100% of students that would be considered at risk of not graduating if Riverview did not exist. Our staff-student ratio is 1:9, which makes crucial relationship building possible. We work with a whole child, meeting all of their needs, such as food, clothing, and working to connect them with medical health, mental health, dental health,
whatever other resources are needed. Every student earned the minimum amount of required credits last year and beat the expectations that even we had set for them. As you can see by our first year report, our students did not perform at the state average in their testing last year. We completely expected that to be the case. Given the fact that the majority of our students were not successful in their school of origin, came to Riverview already substantially behind in their learning. And it was our first year of operation and our first opportunity to have a positive impact on their education. Our students did participate in the state SAS testing and PSAT testing as well. We are on target for, as far as our accountability plan went, the goals in our charter. We understood that the challenges of our student population during, we understood the challenges that our student population had faced during their past educational journey, which made the individualized learning plans that we set for each student crucially important. We planned and succeeded in targeting our at-risk, disadvantaged, and homeless students in the Sullivan County area. We will continue to focus our attention on those students with unique needs who have been unsuccessful in a traditional public school setting. We've met all of our accountability plans, and our goal for our CSP grant was to build a permanent charter school space that passed all the required safety inspections and to obtain a certificate of occupancy, and that goal was met as well. For assessments, we use the exact path test assessments for diagnostic purposes, and the data that we collected using that assessment tool was used to determine what types of projects were needed, if one-on-one was needed, and would be required for specific students in the future. That data will continue to be used to assist with planning each student's educational track and determining what credit recovery methods will be most appropriate and beneficial for each individual student. Our learning goals and objectives were and remain to work with each student to examine their academic records, their state testing, other assessment results, their grade reports, their attendance records, and any other necessary documentation. Staff also examined written samples, oral reading fluency, and math assessments to gather information on the academic standards for each student. The students' knowledge, lives, interests, previous successes, and challenges were also surveyed to help us get a better sense of where the students were at in all the facets of their education. We use this information when working with the students and their families to develop and update their individualized learning plan for each student that reflects their academic and skill development goals in each of our core academic areas. We anticipated that more students would be interested in the ELO opportunities, and we will continue to explore additional opportunities to find options that appeal to more of our student population. To date, we have contacted River Valley College to ensure interested students can participate in their Bridge to College program. We have worked with Sullivan County Nursing Home for internships, training opportunities for students interested in obtaining their LNA. Bar Harbor Bank has agreed to offer internships to any student interested in banking as a career. The One for All Child Care Center has provided ELO opportunities to students wishing to pursue early childhood or elementary education. And Sullivan County Animal Shelter has offered job shadowing opportunities to any student wishing to pursue a career working with animals. During our first year of implementation, or of instruction rather, we were able to use the Admentum platform as planned. We were able to design and implement pull-out activities as needed to meet each student's educational needs. For example, some of our students needed printout of all activities instead of completing their work on the computers. Some students required small group discussion to be successful for some of their modules. Some students required one-on-one tutoring if they were struggling with a specific module. Some required their tests or quizzes to be given verbally. Some required different activities altogether from the Adventum modules to meet their needs while still meeting the state standards. Our staff worked incredibly hard last year to ensure that each student's educational needs were met. The small enrollment size did make this task easier and allowed all of our staff to save their alternative activities that we can use this year, we are using this year, and we can continue to use in the future. And then for ELO opportunities, we are working with Sullivan County Bar Harbor and One for All Child Care Center and the Sullivan County Animal Shelter
Okay, if I can, Dorothea,
Yes, please.
I think we all have the actual report, so you don't really need to read it. To us, but we were just thinking if you wanted to elaborate on anything or highlight anything from it.
Basically, as far as our school goes, it went extremely well last year. We had students who came to us that hadn't been in school in a really long time. And they came to us very anxious, very nervous, were convinced that they were not going to be successful in school ever again. School wasn't for them, but they were willing to give it a try. We had students that came in and we had one student in particular that came in and just sat in a corner by herself for weeks. And eventually she made herself, more comfortable. She took the hoodie off of her head. She got out of the corner. She made her way to a table. She opened her computer. She started engaging in her schoolwork. And it took her a month or better before she was finally able to start engaging with other students, really with anybody. And the beauty of our program, right? It's like she was a young lady who was convinced that she wasn't going to be successful in school. She hadn't been successful in the past. And we gave her the time and the space that she needed. We gave her the support. We let her know that we were there. And she ended the school year with friends. She ended the school year on pace. She ended the school year with plans not only to graduate, but to pursue higher education. So those are the stories. And this isn't only this one individual student. We have a young lady who came in with her mom for the first couple of weeks. And her mom got to stay with her while she completed her schoolwork. And just having her mom there was able to get her over that hurdle that she needed to be able to be in school successfully independently. So this is the students that we've been privileged to work with for the past year and a half now. And when you look at us, like when you're looking at our school and state assessments, it may look like our students aren't where they, need to be, comparing them to students across the state at the state level. But when you think about the students that we have the privilege of working with every day, and you see the successes that they have made in their own educational goals, it's absolutely astonishing to see the differences in these kids when they walk in and they have been bullied and they've been told for years that they weren't going to make it through school, that they weren't going to be successful, and now they are. And just the smiles on their faces when we issue them their first.
And they're coming to school. Their attendance is good. There's no behavioral issues. I've had 3 behavioral issues since we opened. It's mellow. They come in, they do what they need to do, they meet the expectations, and I'm actually, I was expecting a lot more pushback because that's my background, the behavioral piece. And so it's nice to come to work every day and feel happy to be there. And the students, they know that this is where they should be. When they say, if we have to go back to, we'll say Stevens, Newport, wherever they come from, we won't go. Of course, they know that that's not really an option, but students that aren't normally successful in the traditional school setting have exceeded expectations as far as I'm concerned, and they're smiling. They're there every day. They're sitting there doing work without issues. And online classroom is not easy, especially for students who haven't been to school for 3 or 4 years, and they're willing to put in the work. It takes less time for some than others to figure it out. It's not an easy program. There's a lot of pullouts, worksheets, just things that we can do to help them meet the expectations of the program. But it's just it's been a success so far. And we only expect it to get better.
Can you tell me, who is it that tell them that they can't learn? Who tells them that they cannot learn? No, you said that's been told to them. Who is it? Is it the parents or is it teachers or who?
I think it's both. I think it's both. I think they have been unsuccessful in the school, which leads to tension in the home.
Their self-confidence, there's none. And so
Self-efficacy.
yeah, we're able to build that up. For example, this is just an example from this week. So we have a student who hasn't been to school for 3 years, only here because his parents are forcing him to, refuse to go to the high school. It's been a fight. He's here every day, which we hadn't done in the past. It's been a fight. I talk to him probably once a week, like, okay, you know, you need to get moving, you're off pace, blah, 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 blah. And so he had a test that he needed to take and he's been dragging his feet for a couple days. And he's like, I'm gonna fail it anyway, so it doesn't matter. And I'm like, you'll be fine. I'm gonna fail it anyway, so it doesn't matter. And I said, well, guess what? I'm gonna read you the test and you're gonna answer the questions. And I think you're gonna pass. And so the para comes out. She said, he growled at me when I told him that I had to read him the test. And she said, but he got an 87. And I said, Sabbath, what did I tell you? And he said that I would pass. I said, yeah. And big smile. And he finished the class. He finished the class 3 days later, which has taken him, 4 weeks to get 2 units in because he just had a little faith in himself and it's nice.
We have students that came to us with IEPs and they have accommodations for behavior. And we haven't seen those behaviors. So when we have our IEP meetings and we meet with the central districts to go over their IEPs and we don't need to accommodate for those behaviors because they don't exist in our programs.
Well, that speaks well of the kids wanting to be there.
Yeah.
What do you do for culture in the school in terms of, it really helps if you have students who want to be there and whether they're viewing this as their last chance or whatever. But when it comes to bullying issues or that kind of thing, what are you seeing in your school? I mean,
We've only had 1 instance of bullying.
Yeah.
I tell them when they come in for intake, like 0 tolerance. We're not accepting it. I would say off the cuff, 90% of our students have dealt with pretty significant bullying in their past. We have 5 students that haven't been to school for, we'll say 1 to 3 years because of bullying. And they're coming to school. The one bullying instance, he got ISS for a day and a meeting with his parent and apologized and haven't had any other instances. We have a little bit of pushback as far as talking is really the only issue. That's really the only issue we have. Like those teenage boys that have to be louder than everyone else. Really, it's just a good day usually.
So one of the things in here was and we agree with you that we would expect your population to have lower test scores. But I wonder if you can elaborate a little more on your plan for that growth, for getting them. It's gonna be slow, it's gonna be incremental. But how do you approach getting them up notch by notch on the proficiency scores?
It's an ongoing process, as you know. Coming in last year, a lot of the students, we looked at their previous test scores, their data. I spoke to sending schools, guidance counselors. So the expectation really wasn't for them to, exceed the scores that they did. But pulling those scores out, we are able to focus on, most of these students don't even have the basic skills. Well, earlier listening to the other meetings, and it's true across the board. So if we have them in a class that is too hard, we can give them another class to meet their needs. There's a lot of precursors. I'd mentioned it's a pretty neat program. I don't know if you know anything about it, but there's a lot of, they offer like 250 classes. And so if there's an English that they're not able to work through, you can give them I'm having a brain cramp.
That's
Because
okay,
I'm
it
so
happens.
nervous, I'm
Don't be
sorry.
nervous, you're doing fine.
But they're just, you know, it's like a pre-algebra, we can give them a pre-English and, we do a lot of one-on-one. We're able to find things to help them.
Do you do, maybe intake interview is not the right term, but you said you talked to a lot of the guidance counselors and
Yeah.
I know you're getting kids who are really not succeeding in other schools. So what is your intake process? Like, what kind of information do you have on these students to know how to fit their needs when they get there?
So first they put in a basic application, set up a tour. If we go through the process and they think that they might want to come to review, I'll ask for attendance, behavior, any IEP or data reports they might have. I send out a questionnaire, or they get to choose, but send a questionnaire to a few staff that they have interacted with in the past. It was a little bit harder this year. We had a lot of students that haven't been in school since middle school, and those reports just aren't relevant. And so we had to do a lot of shifting around, figuring where they fit in classes, go over a lot of basic skills.
Sure. Can you, for those who might not understand, like, what are the ages of your students and how is it that they go with such large gaps in their school?
9 through 12. Because the truancy process isn't necessarily followed like it should be.
They're high school age.
They're high
right?
school
not-
age.
They're not 23 years old.
No. Our oldest student just turned 21. Our youngest student is 14.
So you have kids who are like literally just don't go to school.
Yeah. They just do not go to school, and so.
And it's not that uncommon. I mean, we have
It's not uncommon
students,
at all.
I mean, I can think of other students at Stevens who are not in school today. We're trying to
Yeah.
get them there, but you know, with the bullying and the environment is such that
They
they
just
can't go in there.
refuse.
It would be probably harmful to them from a mental health standpoint to be there.
Mhm.
And that, I think.
And the
is
school is trying to find a way to protect them, but they can't protect them
Yeah.
either, so.
And even the follow through, I did last year, I tried one student in particular with the truancy follow through DCYF, and it was like a 3.5 month process. So the student hadn't been in school for 3 months. And then she ended up going back to Stevens and I didn't even know for 2 weeks. So I'm calling every day, talking to probation, and then finally the probation officer says, oh, yeah, she's been back at Stevens for 2 weeks. And I was like, okay, thank you for telling me.
But as far as bringing the test scores up, we have students right now that are on a wait list
Mhm.
they're in 8th grade and they already want to come next year. So as we start getting our students younger and younger, we'll have the opportunities to work with them their freshman year, their sophomore year, and get them ready for their junior testing that happens. So I think really it's just getting them in school, keeping them in school, giving them the skills that they don't have, that they desperately need to score better on the
Exact
test.
path, which
Yeah.
after the fact, when I sit there and think about all the things I should have said, Exact Path is another program that Edmentum offers. And what it does is student starts the data process and it brings them from 1st grade to, they may be a 12th grader, and if they make it up to 9th grade in their skills, then we know that they're approximately there. And it goes across the board. It's science, math, and English. So it goes back and forth. If they answer one question, they get it wrong, they may go back a level. And each of those tests, I think the minimum is 50 questions and the maximum is like 100. And it's a process that they work through. And they can earn credit for that as well, as elective credit, which is nice.
Anybody else have questions? All right, well, thanks. Wrap it up. Appreciate the work that you're doing.
Thank you. It's worth it. Have a great day.
Two. Contract, this is just for discussion, we don't have to vote on this, but.
Yeah, I can just introduce it for you quickly.
Sure.
My name is Casey Silva. I'm from the Office of Charter Schools and I manage the Charter School Program Grant that we received from USAID in 2019. That grant was $46 million and it had certain requirements attached to it. One of those was to look and improve our charter school authorization processes. And so Tal and I have participated in a number of training sessions offered by USAID and through other nationwide organizations to see what other states do and what's considered best practice. And one element we found very interesting and maybe helpful for our process here in New Hampshire is the charter school contract, which pulls out all the uniform requirements of a charter school into a single uniform document and still allows for all the innovation and differentiation in the charter document as an attachment. So we've provided you with a very rough draft template, kind of tailored to New Hampshire a little bit, but it's there for you to review and look at. And what we were hoping for is that after you've had a chance to review it, you could give us your feelings and thoughts and feedback on that. And if you had any further actions for us relative to that, we'd be happy to discuss it at another meeting.
No, I think it was very thorough. I do have some questions. Go through it. Let me find the page number. So it'd be page 14, F 2, curriculum changes. Just wondering what the threshold there is considered for significantly changing your curriculum. It's very gray, so I didn't know if there was a standard.
Yeah, and maybe we would want to refine that more, or provide more detail around that, maybe call it model or method of delivery, define what that would be in a future document.
Yeah, I think it's worth having a conversation with
Yeah.
you guys to say, you know, we want to, I don't want them to come before us for every change. But if it's a really large change of something, maybe we should take a look at it, but we should talk through what that looks like.
Yeah, so it's
not necessarily now, but.
right, exactly, yeah. So, you know, we're, like we said, we're here every month and we welcome your input and we can schedule something at a later date to talk about that one in more depth once you've had time to really digest it and look at it.
Yeah.
The second item is related to this. It's also an outcome of our charter school program grant. And that grant requires we provide training to our charter school authorizers. So we contracted with WestEd to develop some best practice sessions for the State Board of Education, which is currently the only active charter authorizer in the state. And per the letter that we provided, that's an overview of that training. It's 5 sessions. They're all videos that you can watch and they run about 20 to 30 minutes. But it's thematic on the major responsibilities of a charter school authorizer. It presents you not only with what New Hampshire law is, but also what other states are doing that are considered best practice. So if you have any ideas after those trainings, we'd love to hear that too and help you through any tweaks that you may want to see. This is all part of a larger, you know, effort of us to like look at what needs fixing in the law and the rule and the way that we authorize charter schools.
So where do we find it?
That is in your Canvas account that I
We
think.
haven't enrolled them yet.
Okay.
Only, I think just Drew's enrolled in it right now and maybe the commissioner.
Okay, so we could probably get them all.
I
on
think you
board.
wanted to introduce it
Yeah.
before.
So we
enroll
have
them.
reporting requirements at the end of every federal year, so we're hoping that you guys could complete this by June 30th, so we could tell USAID that you have taken these classes and mark that off our to-do list.
Casey, who just said sponsored these classes? WestEd?
WestEd developed them for us, yes.
So what I'll do is I'll have you enrolled in it. So when you go into it, you'll see your Canvas instance for the board materials, but you'll also see this WestEd instance. I think you already do. True, you should at least, I think.
Yeah.
Send us an email that says, okay,
No, I think when you log in, you will actually see it. It'll appear with Canvas. It'll populate into as one of your classes.
And now I see minimum standards and State Board of Education.
Correct.
So you
So this will be a new one that will be right with it. Yes, it'll be charter school authorization best practices.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Really like that contract. I think we should,
Yeah.
somebody should go through it.
Somebody should.
Fine
go through
tune.
that. I will go through.
But I found some typos and other stuff, but I think, we could really use it. So maybe we think about putting that on the agenda for next month, and everybody has a chance to really read through it, chat with them about it. Because I think it would be great to move forward with some rules and just incorporate this into the rule for charter schools. Rulemaking.
Speaking of rules.
Is Julie back there?
Hello again. Julie Shea, Administrative Rules Coordinator, and I have here
Steve Appleby, Director, Educator Support and Higher Education. The first item in rulemaking is 505.09. This is an adjustment to our new and renewal fee structure for licenses, educator licenses. In the packet, you'll see a graph. What we did was we took the last 20 years of CPI data and charted it against what that fee has been. And what you'll see there is there's quite a gap that gets wider now each year.
That was really helpful, by the way, having that chart.
Well, we went down in 2020, we think for the first time in 100 years. And of course, the timing of that was right before the pandemic. And then, of course, costs have just skyrocketed since then. And it's all costs. It's labor costs to staff the Bureau. It's also costs, IT expenses to maintain our licensing system. So.
Good point. You can really see the jump in inflation too, right there.
Yeah.
Right. Any questions?
Is this something we're voting on?
Yes.
I'm gonna abstain.
Okay.
I move that the State Board of Education approve the initial proposal for ED 505.09 relative to educator licensing fees.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
That's 4 and 2 abstentions, Ken and me.
Right, you're abstaining. I have yes.
Thank you, everyone.
My wife's an educator.
Yeah.
Oh.
So I'm not gonna charge her any fees.
You didn't get that.
Kind of a conflict.
Yeah.
Strange.
Okay.
You just went, the companies you want dinner tonight, right?
the next item I have, I think, there she is. I was gonna say, I think Melissa's coming down. But we have the final proposal for ED 311, the School Health Services. Again, in the packet, I included the statute as well, because I thought that helped a little bit in terms of looking at the changes that were made versus the statute. I don't know if you have any questions, or if Melissa, you want to add anything initially before they have questions.
Melissa White, Division Director for Learner Support, and this was just an opportunity to kind of tighten up the language a little bit, clean it up, but no substantial changes were made.
I'm waiting for my internet to open the item. I did have a question, and I know we've gotten all the way to the final rule process here, but we've been kind of preoccupied with 306s. So I think one of the complaints I hear most from parents is, and I just want to chat about it. Maybe we don't do anything with the rule here, but the requirement to have the nurse give all medication, right? It's all, just to be clear, it's prescription medication, right? Under here, I have to go back through. So if I have, is it prescription and over the counter? It's been a little bit since I looked at this. I'll go back and find it.
School nurse may delegate the administration of medications if appropriate to others.
So it can be the nurse, it could be if delegated to the principal or another building level administrator.
So it
But
says-
that would include any medication, so if it was Tylenol or.
Yeah, I'm just looking here, so let's see. What I have here.
For page 3 of the PDF, like halfway down, C1.
Yeah, no, I'm looking at, the 3 is the student to possess and self-administer. So I just want to make clear that that's still an option. Like the nurse can say, I designate the student to take and self-administer, so that's, okay. I just want to make it clear that we're holding onto that as an option so that and the nurse's determination, she can decide, oh, yeah, this, you don't need me to put that in your mouth for you, right? Okay.
You know, cough drop or something like that, yes, that makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, well, there's all kinds of stuff that kids, it could even be prescription meds and kids can be responsible enough to take that on their own. But the nurse would probably be able to tell if she needed to take over that or, okay.
And even most often, they do have some sort of, something in writing from the parents that allows.
Yeah.
You wouldn't send a type 1 diabetic, the nurse every time that they use
Exactly.
insulin when they're practicing leveraging.
Well, you know, everything from that to just cold medicine. Right?
Yeah.
Just, okay. Just making clear that that was still an option for the nurse. All right. I'm good.
I motion that the state board approve the final proposal for ED 311 regarding school health services.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All right. Okay, minimum standards.
So we got our approval letter back from OLS this morning regarding the first half. The second half, did not have a conditional approval. It was approved as the final proposal, at the same meeting. And so that one, we didn't have to do anything earlier today. It was just an adopt now. So again, in both the packets, you have the final text, you have all of the paperwork that goes with it, and also the recommendations from the Legislative Oversight Committee and their approval. And I don't know if there are any questions about that or the adoption.
All right, motion.
I move that the State Board of Education adopt ED 306.27 through 306.39.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
You adopt the first one as well.
Yep, here comes.
Okay.
Just to.
Oh, I put that one last, just in case, that's right.
This one says the same thing.
Well, 306.1.
1.26.
306.26.
Yeah. I move the State Board of Education adopt ED 306.01 through 306.26.
Second.
All of it.
Aye. Holy.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
That's for the next 10 years.
Yeah, yep, unless we want to reopen it for some reason. Well, we had discussed, and I do think this is worth discussing. I know Jim LeBeau had an interest in this, taking a longer, deeper look at the high school graduation requirements, that component of it, where the balance of, you know, how do you balance those credits, right? I think we made some really positive changes, and those like added statistics, as a, you know, was valuable. We had some other ones, but I think at some point, maybe inviting a bigger discussion on what does a well-rounded high school graduate look like today going forward, because we really haven't rethought that in a long time, and it may be worth taking up if we have the appetite for it.
Maybe it's more choice and.
Yeah.
What does
Well,
the content areas look like for
I think
the
that's,
second half of the 21st century workers?
and I think that's more along the lines of what we might want to think about.
The academic standards.
Yeah, well, those credit requirements for graduation, right? That's, well, I mean, the standards are a whole other.
Exactly. Well,
thing to open
I
up.
mean, that's the next big thing. in
It
front of
is,
you.
it is the next big thing, is doing our academic standards, but I do think we should think
Some of them
about,
are bigger.
you know, so one of the things that we took a stab at addressing was, it was all algebra based, right? So there was no requirement in there for taking statistics, which is, you know, much more commonly useful in, a lot of right out of high school jobs now than algebra is. So I think there's some ways we can look at how that's structured and maybe just have that conversation with some employers, with some other folks, be like, does this cover what kids need to know when they graduate? And I'm not sure it does. I think it's worth a discussion.
Also not walking out on the commissioner's report.
Yeah.
Because he's the commissioner, but.
It is 2 for you. So Phil had a previous commitment, he had to be out, of course. So commissioners update.
Mr. Chairman, I still have a quorum.
We do.
Okay, a couple of things to update you on. So the first thing I'm going to remind you about, and Angela's going to be happy about this, is if you haven't received it, you should have received your 15A form from the state. So there's a conflict of interest form that you have to complete. It's pretty routine stuff. I think everybody's all set. But you do have to submit that. If you don't, the Secretary of State's office will be nagging you.
I just pinged all of you, and it's gonna be an email that comes in as 15A. And that's what it is.
I was concerned.
No, it's 15A, it's from the Secretary of State's office.
It's annual.
After all the training we get at the DOE on phishing.
So it's actually going to, I see that only Phil has an account, it's gonna ping you to actually create an account, and then you go in and you actually fill it in online, there's no paper, there's nothing, and
Hit
just,
submit and you're
and
good to
just
go.
submit it.
I mean, and
That's all.
essentially, like, so the commitment, so I have to designate that I'm the Commissioner of Education. You would designate that you sit on this board. If you sit on other board, like other
it's basic.
state level board stuff, that's really what it is. Like I'm a trustee for the university system, those kinds of things. Is what it's for. So it's pretty straightforward.
Thank you for saying it. And,
You wouldn't have known, I know it's.
That's why I wanted to make sure I highlighted it, 'cause otherwise we're
Hundreds
gonna
of
get-
delete normally, you know, so.
It's a very strange email, it's 15A, you gotta go in it, and then every time you go in, it's going to authenticate it, so it's gonna, but yes, it's a legitimate email. I just sent it to all of you.
Thank you for sending it to my private email rather than
Yes, and it can go to your private, yes. Okay, thanks.
It's the hardest thing to get into.
So the next thing that I will flag for you is that we did designate 2 schools just recently. So it's a commissioner's designation through a federal program as distinguished schools. And given the conversation we had about assessment results, I thought that this was fairly timely. So it was the Krista McAuliffe School in Concord, and they have a 75.9% English language arts proficiency at that school. Yes, exactly. So it's not all bad, right? And then I have, which one is the next one? Is my Sunset Heights School, which is in Nashua, I believe. And they have a 71.6 proficiency rate in mathematics.
Great.
And we actually had some schools that performed higher than that, but they had smaller cohorts. Both of these schools had about 150 students. And so something to be excited about there.
Nice.
We did just recently name our 2 Youth Senate Program members. And this is a great program. So we've got Ryan Casey is from Bishop Brady High School, and William Brochu, who is from Brewster Academy up in Wolfboro. And this program, so it's a pretty rigorous program. They have to get nominated by the principals. They have to fill out an application. They have to write an essay on a kind of gnarly topic. They have to, and so the applications get screened by a panel, and then they bring in, I think, about a dozen for oral presentations, and that they come in, they do an oral presentation to, we've got, this year, we didn't have this year, but we normally have like one of the Supreme Court justices, we have a Superior Court judge, we got somebody from the Attorney General's office, we got retired judges, so it's a pretty, austere panel of folks that they're presenting to, and asking them a lot of different questions and stuff like that, and and so we selected 2. By winning, they each get a $10,000 post-secondary scholarship.
Wow.
That they will be able to use. And I can tell you, actually, last year, one of the kids who was one of the awardees needed every scholarship dollar he could get, and he is happily enrolled at St. A's this year, and also ran for state rep and was elected as a state rep, as well. Yes, exactly. One of the youngest, not the youngest, but one of the youngest. So great program, and then they get to go to DC and spend a week down there, hobnobbing with senators and executive branch officials and stuff like that. So it's a great program for kids. I don't know if you noticed in the atrium, we have a new addition down there. It's all lit up. This is kind of a display unit. We basically acquired these Flex Grow systems to acquire and donate and put out into the schools as part of both as part of a food and nutrition grant type program, to help make sure that kiddos know where food comes from, although it doesn't actually come from a plastic device with water, but it can be grown there. But anyways, it will provide, it'll actually have some output that they get to actually use in the cafeterias as well. And so just kind of pushing some of that stuff out into the schools. And that's just a demonstration model for us, for people who are interested in how it's going. We've got our own setup. And I think we're going to be doing some testing on the quality and some sciencey stuff around it as well that we'll be able to push out to the schools. So last month, did anybody go to the Mike Rowe? Some of you may have
We
heard
couldn't
that.
get in.
Nobody couldn't get in.
Yeah, we almost couldn't get in, don't worry. It wasn't that easy, right, Christine? Yes, it was not easy. Okay, well, sorry you couldn't get in. But it was a great program. There were, we had hundreds of kids who came to the program. Not all of the kids were able to get in. Some of them were in an overflow room with video, but some did get in. But there was a huge tent set up. We had 80 commercial organizations came there and were recruiting kids and teaching them about the trades and things that they are engaged in. And Mike Rowe did a great job. Governor Governor-elect Ayotte did a great job, in the presentation. So that was good. Trade Palooza. Amanda did that last year, did this year. I don't know if she's gonna do it next year. It was a lot of work for her to pull that off, but we did end up awarding over $110,000 of scholarships to students through that process. So
That's great.
yeah.
But I don't you think that sort of shows the interest in trades?
Oh, yeah.
And like, again, we were just talking about the high school graduation credits, which are all sort of
Non-trade.
college career path based, right? And we have this huge cohort of students and their parents who are telling us, we really want to learn stuff that sends us on a path to trade. Like that
Yeah.
needs to be an option for as many kids as possible.
We do want to be an option, and I'll just take this opportunity to mention, so I mean, like, I'm a believer as well, and that we've made a lot of advancement over the years of trying to get kids access to our career and technical education programs. The biggest access really has been, calendaring and scheduling. And in spite of the fact that we passed laws that say that you have to coordinate calendars and schedules, one school has a PD day when somebody else's, doesn't. And so what is this kid gonna do? And so all these conflicts in scheduling. And actually, if you look at the data, students who attend a high school that has a career and technical education center as part of it have about a 70% chance of taking at least one CTE class. If you're in ascending districts, which means you got to get on a bus and get over there, sometimes in the middle of the day, and then you got to get back in time for English class and stuff like that, you got about 12% chance of doing it. And it's just silly because you know that the kids at both high schools want to access these programs at the same level. So we have been advocating, and I have been pushing hard in the legislature for just to do more of a comprehensive approach. Initially, we finally got it so that they could at least take math when they're there. Because like if a kid a kid buses to the Hillsborough High School, then he gets on another bus and he buses 40 minutes to the Concord CTE Center, and he takes his, 90-minute block in CTE, then they got to get back on a bus and come all the way back to their high school to take the math class. I'm like, well, they take classes, academic. And I'm like, well, why don't they just stay there? And so actually, Senator Waters, we worked on a bill with him for this session. He's introducing a bill. Finally, that would just create comprehensive centers, right? Like if a kid gets in, because not all the programs have room, but if you get enrolled into one of the CTE programs, that you can just go there, right? Like you'll do one bus trip, you go to school there, and you take your academic classes there as well. And we'll see how that goes. It's just another kind of trying to create opportunities for students.
More teaching
Frank,
jobs.
how many of these schools have a maker space or a maker lab and technology?
So most of the maker labs are not at the high school level, but in the middle school level is more at the middle school level. I don't know the answer to how many of them have one. But we've got, towards the maker lab kind of an approach. So many of them do have something because many of them are offering some type of robotics or computer type of programming. And so this doesn't answer your question, but it might help you understand. So you're familiar with the X-Core robot program that we did?
Yeah.
Yeah, so so those are out in every school now with training, available. So could they have more maker spaces? Probably, but it's not a function of like in this case, it's not a function of not having the space. It's a function of like the kids getting access. Yeah, exactly, right. And even if you had the space, like, well, sorry, you don't have access to that because you need to do algebra again because you didn't do well in it, and maybe if they did this, then they would recognize that algebra has some application and they want to learn in
The
algebra.
reason why I go all over the world teaching kids maker programs.
Yeah.
And I haven't gotten my.
And we can get
there's
one
no
invitation
traction.
here, right?
Even sitting in this position, I can't get any traction, because, and that changes a child's mind. The
Yeah.
early achievements in even technology and, you grow up thinking I can never code, I can never do any of these kind of things, You need to, so how do you break it? And it has to be broken at the middle school level.
Yeah.
And anything we could do, I'd love to contribute to
So I
that.
can think of some things that we can do to try and help gain access for you to make the pitch to the superintendents, who are the ones who, those are the gatekeepers, right? Who are gonna either allow it in or not, so.
It's interesting you bring that up. I went to Pentucket Junior High in West Newbury, Massachusetts, in seventh and eighth grade. You had photography, we had like a metal shop. It wasn't, it's not what you were talking about, but there was certain exposure.
No, but that was just the old version of the makerspace that he's talking about, right? We've just upgraded, but we all had shop when we went to school, but that doesn't happen anymore, right?
So currently I'm actually teaching kids in Myanmar, every Mondays and Fridays.
Yeah.
And your kids who have, because of the coup and, civil war and all those kind of things, who have not been going to school. I'm teaching them design, coding, and they're sending me CAD files and, electronics stuff and I.
Why
think
can
they
Myanmar do, but we can't?
Exactly, that's what I'm saying, and these kids, when we send out a kit of materials, it takes them 3 weeks to get there because it has to go through all the war-torn area.
Yeah.
And you're teaching online and I'm saying, I can't do this in New Hampshire, but I can do this in next month, I'm going to Japan to teach, but
Yeah.
it's really frustrating.
Let's talk to Mark and we'll see what we can do to kind of break some of that down, so. Because I know I've even tried to help get you into some of these places and it's just, and from your many years, like some of these, they just gatekeepers, right? Like.
One of the things with Middleton, when we did our tuition agreement with Governor Wentworth, that was a selling factor because our students were going from Middleton south to Farmington, where we were tuitioning students. And if they were in the CTE program, now they're going back north, pass through Middleton again to go north to Wolfboro.
In the middle of the day.
And then,
Yeah.
and then they had to go back. So that was a significant factor in us enrolling because it was going to be the ease of getting into the CTE program. The other piece obviously is that I went to Whittier Tech in Haverhill, Massachusetts, in the air conditioning refrigeration program with a 3-year trade certificate in that.
And look, you came out okay. Sometimes.
Well, I'm here, so, but, the requirement we had to take a double English class, and of course, we were on a 42-minute period schedule, so that meant to meet the educational requirements in Massachusetts, had to take a double English, but we had shop week, and I don't know if that's something that, I'll attest that, I sent the salvo email to Frank to see if he'd be willing to talk to me about technical education. Yes, he did respond favorably, thank you.
I'm a plan,
Yes, so, and to be honest, for me, as my guidance counselor called my mother up in 8th grade, what do you mean he wants to go to trades? So, because I was an A student.
Yeah, there's a lot of that that's still being overcome, so.
So,
But I know.
but I guess my point is that I would hope that at some point New Hampshire would consider maybe a model like Massachusetts and actually having a trade school. Our CTE programs are fairly limited as to the types of trades that are there. And it has a lot to do with maybe the demographic where they're located. Like they do have a business marketing hospitality at Governor Wentworth because Wolfboro is the oldest tourist community. So it makes sense. But I do speak to people in the trade such as HVAC. They get the community college in Manchester, which is post high school, but
even in my, can I tell you something, even in my tenure here, I've seen 2 HVAC programs closed in the high school programming because of no interest, couldn't get any kids in it. Yeah. So let me just hit you a couple more things. You will notice that Max, the Moose downstairs has moved over. And then I don't know if you noticed across the way there's we primed the wall. So we ran a contest for some students to paint a mural. That will kind of create a setting because he's got a green carpet underneath him now. And we're going to put a background behind him. And we had a contest for students and they're coming in shortly, I think before Christmas, to paint a mural. So Max will feel at home right there. I'm doing everything I can to never let Max go back to the Cultural and Natural Resources Agency.
He's like the elf on the shelf.
Yeah.
Moose on the loose.
Moose on the loose, yes, exactly. He gets decorated too, like he's got his Christmas theme thing going on right now. Okay, and then last week we had something called Celebrating Leadership in Education Award, which was celebrating the Teacher of the Year We have a banquet just celebrating that. Governor Sununu was there, Governor-elect Ayotte was there, a number of representatives and senators just recognizing the educators. And I'm gonna once again just give a shout out to Christine for the work that she has done on this program, which grew it from a very small program to over 331 applications this year, so, which was not easy. You know, and our teacher of the year this year, the selection committee is a Spanish teacher from Bedford, high school Spanish teacher who is wound up and excited about the role. And I think she's going to be a great representative and ambassador for all of us, both here and nationally. And then the last thing I'll close with is I got a chance earlier this week to visit another foreign language program, but another one that I have been after for 8 years, and we finally got it off the ground and it's going. It is an immersion program in Manchester. It's the first of 2 schools that are going to be set up. What that means is that the students in the school are both learning English and Spanish simultaneously. So it's an immersion program, and essentially the way these programs function is, you know, after a year and certainly after maybe a 3-year period, all these kids are completely fluent in 2 languages. They can do their academics in 2 languages. And you're really just, you know, giving them a gift. You know, all of the research would tell you that it enhances the education, building all kinds of neural pathways for these kiddos that just last the rest of their lives, in addition to the gift of being able to communicate in another language. So I'm excited. So I got to go visit and hang out with the kids this week to just, you know, see it in operation and off to the races and going. So it started as Bakersfield in Manchester. It's got 2 classrooms that are, you know, the dual immersion or the immersion classrooms. And then the deal that I have with Jen Gillis, who is the superintendent down there, is that we will know when we will have arrived when parents in Bedford want to tuition their kids to Manchester to go to school because they want their kids to have access to this unbelievably great program of immersion language. So, so those are the things that I have for you.
Great.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Like you mentioned 2 schools, one in English language and the other one in mathematics. Was there any school that did really well in science?
You know, we only evaluated across the math and English scores, because these were elementary schools. So they're most of our title schools are, not in the high school level, at the elementary, because that way you can direct those resources early. And so they have, the science assessment is only done in 1 time, so it did not include those.
Okay.
But we could add science to that.
Yeah.
All right. Unless anybody has any pressing discussions, we can go straight to the consent agenda. Meeting minutes? We can just do.
Actually, can I just have one more thing? Thank you for the 306s. So just to let you know, so we are working on a technical advisory that will be going out to the schools and then working on some professional development around the 306 rules so that everybody both is aware of what's in them and understands how they're to be applied in the learning environment. So,
great.
Sorry about that.
No, it's good. All right. My Dayquil is wearing off. So
Yeah, I could tell.
let's move this
I got
along.
some
All in favor?
I've got more in the bag. I just gotta take it.
Right, I make a motion to accept the meeting minutes.
You want to just do the whole consent agenda?
Yeah,
Just do it all?
let's just approve the whole consent agenda as a slate.
Yeah. Second? I'll give 10 seconds. All in favor?
Aye.
That is it. Motion to adjourn.
A motion to adjourn.
Oh, Jim got that one. All in favor? All right. Thanks, everybody.
And I wish you all a very happy holidays
Yes.
and MC.